A dying girl, a steak knife, a terrified waitress with a secret. When billionaire Ethan Calloway watched his teenage daughter collapse on a filthy diner floor, he thought it was another panic attack. He was wrong. She had minutes to live, and the shy, invisible waitress everyone ignored was about to grab a kitchen knife and do something that would destroy her quiet life forever. One choice. One impossible procedure. One woman hiding from a past she thought she'd escaped. This is her story. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The rain hit Seattle like punishment. Claire Bennett stood behind the counter of the Rusty Fork, watching water hammer against the cracked front windows while the ancient radiator coughed and wheezed in the corner. 6:30 in the morning. The breakfast shift. Her least favorite because it meant dealing with Murray, the line cook who smelled like cigarettes and talked to himself, and because the regulars were miserable before coffee and worse after it. She wiped down the same section of counter for the third time, a nervous habit she couldn't shake. Keep moving, stay invisible, get through the shift. Order up, Murray grunted from the kitchen window, his voice like gravel in a blender. Claire grabbed the plates, runny eggs and burnt toast for table 3, and crossed the dining room with her head down. The diner was nearly empty, just Vernon, the overnight security guard from the building next door, nursing his coffee and reading yesterday's newspaper, and 2 construction workers arguing about the Seahawks near the back booth. She set the plates down without making eye contact. "Can I get you anything else?" "Yeah," one of them said, not looking up from his phone. "Coffee that doesn't taste like dishwater." Claire forced a smile. "I'll bring a fresh pot." She'd been doing this for 3 years, smiling when people were rude, apologizing for things that weren't her fault, pretending the comments didn't sting. It was easier than explaining, easier than remembering. Back at the counter, she poured fresh coffee from the machine that had probably been old when Reagan was president. Her hands were steady. They were always steady now. That was the problem. The door chimed. Claire glanced up and immediately looked away. A man had entered. Tall, expensive suit under a dripping overcoat, dark hair wet from the rain. He moved like someone used to being noticed, and Claire had learned years ago that people like that didn't see people like her, which was fine. Preferred, actually. Behind him, a teenage girl shuffled through the door, maybe 15, 16, thin in a way that looked painful. Dark circles under her eyes, a hoodie 3 sizes too big swallowing her frame. The man, her father, obviously, guided her toward a booth near the window with a hand on her shoulder that looked more possessive than protective. "Sit," he said. Not unkindly, but not gently either. The girl slid into the booth without a word. Her father sat across from her, already pulling out his phone. Claire grabbed 2 menus and approached the table, her practiced smile firmly in place. "Good morning, can I start you with some coffee?" The man didn't look up. "Black, and orange juice for her." "I don't want anything," the girl said quietly. "Sophie," the man's voice carried a warning, "you need to eat." "I'm not hungry." "That's not negotiable." Claire stood there, invisible again, holding the menus while they stared at each other across the table. The girl, Sophie, looked like she wanted to disappear into her hoodie. Her father looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "I'll give you a minute," Claire said softly, setting the menus down. Back at the counter, she poured the coffee and orange juice, taking her time. She'd learned to read people during these shifts, the business types who barked orders without please or thank you, the lonely ones who lingered over refills just to hear another voice, the families who fought in public because they'd run out of private places to do it. This father and daughter fell into the last category. She could see it in the way they sat, too much space between them, like the booth couldn't contain all the things they weren't saying. She brought their drinks over, set them down carefully. "Have you decided?" she asked. The father ordered without consulting the menu. "Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, fruit instead of potatoes, for both of us." "Dad, Sophie, I'm not arguing about this. You haven't eaten a real meal in 3 days. You don't know that." "I know exactly that. Mrs. Chen tells me everything you throw away." The girl's face flushed. "I can't believe you're paying the housekeeper to spy on me." "I'm paying her to keep you alive since you've decided to stop doing it yourself." Claire backed away slowly, pretending she hadn't heard. She'd punch the order into the ancient computer terminal and forget this conversation like she forgot all the others. That was the job. Bear witness to strangers' worst moments and then erase the memory. Except, she glanced back at the table. The girl had her head down, picking at the paper placemat. Her breathing looked strange, shallow, fast. Claire frowned, then shook her head. Not her business. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. Murray slapped the bell at the kitchen window. Order up! The next 20 minutes passed in the usual rhythm. Pour coffee, clear tables, smile at complaints. Murray burnt the toast for table 3 again, and Vernon asked for his 4th refill, which meant he was avoiding going home. The construction workers left without tipping. Claire brought the father and daughter their plates. The eggs looked acceptable, which was generous for Murray's cooking. The fruit was canned, swimming in too much syrup. "Thank you," the girl said quietly. It was the first time she'd made eye contact, and Claire felt something catch in her chest. The girl's eyes were wrong, not upset wrong. Something else. The pupils were slightly different sizes. Claire blinked, looked away, delivered the food, and retreated. But she kept watching from behind the counter, wiping the same spot over and over while the father ate mechanically, checking his phone between bites. The girl pushed food around her plate, occasionally lifting a piece of melon to her mouth, and then setting it down without eating. "Sophie, please." "I'm trying." "You're not trying. You're performing trying." There's a difference. The girl's hands were shaking. Claire noticed that from across the room, trembling enough to make the fork rattle against the plate. She should stop staring, mind her own business. But something felt wrong. That shallow breathing, the asymmetric pupils, the tremor in her hands. The father was still on his phone, answering emails probably, completely absorbed. He didn't see what Claire saw. The girl stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I need the bathroom," she said. Her father barely looked up. "Make it quick. I have a meeting at 8. The girl walked toward the back hallway where the restrooms were, moving carefully, like the floor might shift under her feet. Claire told herself to let it go. Whatever was happening with that family wasn't her problem. She'd left that life behind, left the responsibility and the guilt, and the nights she couldn't sleep because someone died, and maybe if she'd been faster, smarter, better, but the crash cut through her thoughts like a gunshot. Claire's head snapped up. The hallway. Something had fallen. The father was still on his phone. Vernon was still reading his newspaper. Murray was scraping the griddle in the kitchen. Nobody else had heard it. Claire moved without thinking, her body responding before her brain could stop her. She crossed the dining room quickly, quietly, and turned into the hallway. The girl was on the floor, not sitting, not conscious. Collapsed against the wall near the bathroom door, her body twisted at an angle that made Claire's stomach drop. "Hey," Claire said, dropping to her knees. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. The girl's eyes were half open, unfocused. Her breathing was wrong, rapid, shallow, wheezing. Her lips were turning blue. Claire pressed 2 fingers to the girl's neck. The pulse was there, but wrong. Too fast. Thready. "Someone call 911!" Claire shouted toward the dining room. She could hear Vernon moving, his chair scraping. The father's voice, sharp with irritation. "What's going on back there?" Claire ignored him. She tilted the girl's head back, checking her airway. Clear. But the breathing was getting worse. Not a seizure. Not a heart attack. Something else. The girl's chest wasn't moving right, one side rising more than the other. No. Claire's mind raced through possibilities, training she'd tried to bury coming back in a flood. Asymmetric chest movement, rapid breathing, hypoxia. Jugular vein distension. She checked. Yes. There. Tension pneumothorax. The girl's lung had collapsed. Air was building up in her chest cavity, crushing her other lung, compressing her heart. Without decompression, she'd be dead in minutes. "What did you do to her?" Claire looked up. The father was standing over them, his face white with shock and rage. "Get back," Claire said. "She needs space." "What happened? What did you—" "Her lung collapsed. She needs a hospital. Now." "The ambulance is coming," Vernon called from the dining room. "They said 15 minutes. Traffic's a nightmare with the storm." 15 minutes. Claire looked down at the girl, whose lips were now definitively blue. Her breathing was barely there. 15 minutes was a death sentence. "Move," the father said, trying to push Claire aside. "I need to help her." You can't help her. Nobody can help her unless someone performed a needle decompression. Here, now. With improvised equipment and no backup and no safety net, Claire stood up fast, her heart hammering. I need a knife, the sharpest one you have, and vodka or rubbing alcohol, and a plastic straw. Murray appeared in the hallway, wiping his hands on his apron. What the hell? A knife, Claire repeated. Now. And alcohol. Anything sterile. Are you insane? The father shouted. Get away from her. If I don't do this, she dies before the ambulance gets here. You're a waitress. Claire met his eyes. 3 years of hiding, of running from who she'd been, of serving coffee and pretending she wasn't capable of more. All of it collapsed in that moment. No, she said quietly. I'm not. She turned to Murray. The knife. Hurry. Something in her voice must have cut through his confusion because he disappeared into the kitchen. The father grabbed Claire's arm. I'm calling the police. You're not touching my daughter. Then she dies. Claire pulled her arm free. Her right lung collapsed. Air is building up in her chest, crushing everything else. In 3, maybe 4 minutes, her heart will stop. The only way to save her is to release that pressure manually. You expect me to believe you can... I don't care what you believe. But if you want your daughter to live, you need to let me work. Murray reappeared with a steak knife and a bottle of vodka from behind the counter. This is what we got. Claire took them. Her hands were steady, completely steady, like they'd never forgotten what to do. She knelt beside the girl again, pushing aside the oversized hoodie. The father was on his phone, shouting at someone, police probably. Vernon was hovering nearby, looking sick. Claire poured vodka over the knife blade, over her own hands. It wasn't enough. It wasn't sterile, but it was what she had. Please, she whispered to no one in particular, please let this work. She found the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. The spot she'd done this before in a proper ER with proper equipment and proper supervision. Her fingers traced the rib. The father saw the knife and lost his mind. No, absolutely not. You are not... Claire ignored him. She made the cut. Small, controlled, just through the skin and muscle. The girl didn't react, completely unconscious now. Blood welled up. Claire grabbed the plastic straw Murray had included, broke off a section. You're killing her, the father screamed. Someone stop her! Vernon moved like he might try, but Claire was already inserting the straw into the incision, angling it carefully between the ribs. There was resistance. Then nothing. Then a hiss of air escaping. The girl's chest moved. Different now. Better. The pressure releasing. Claire held her breath, counting seconds. 5, 10, 15. The girl gasped, a horrible, desperate sound. But she was breathing. Her eyes fluttered open, confused, terrified, but alive. The father dropped to his knees beside them, his phone clattering to the floor. Sophie? Sophie, baby, can you hear me? The girl made a small noise, her hand reaching for her father. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Claire sat back on her heels, the bloody knife still in her hand, and waited for everything to fall apart. The police arrived before the paramedics. 2 officers, both looking wet and irritated from the storm. They took one look at the scene, the girl on the floor, Claire holding a knife, blood on the tile, and their hands went to their weapons. Drop the knife! Claire set it down slowly. She had a tension pneumothorax. I performed a decompression. The ambulance. Hands where I can see them. She raised her hands. Blood was already drying between her fingers. Her shift dress had dark stains across the front. The father was talking rapidly, his words tumbling over each other. She cut my daughter. She just... with a kitchen knife. She said the lung was collapsed, but I don't know if... One officer approached Claire while the other checked on the girl. Claire didn't resist when they pulled her arms behind her back. The handcuffs were cold against her wrists. I'm a doctor, she said quietly. Was a doctor. She needed immediate intervention or she would have died. You got ID? In my purse. Behind the counter. The paramedics burst through the door, bringing cold air and rain with them. 2 of them, moving fast with their equipment. They took in the scene, and one of them, a woman in her 40s with gray streaks in her hair, stopped short when she saw the makeshift decompression. Holy shit, she breathed. Who did this? The officer jerked his thumb at Claire. The waitress. The paramedic knelt beside the girl, checking the insertion site. This is exactly right. Textbook placement. Did you use a straw? It's all I had, Claire said. The paramedic looked up at her, something like awe in her expression. You saved her life. Another few minutes, and... She shook her head. Where'd you learn to do this? Claire didn't answer. The second paramedic was already placing a proper chest tube, working efficiently while the girl remained semi-conscious on the floor. They got her on a gurney, hooked up to oxygen, vitals stabilizing. The father climbed into the ambulance with them, but before he left, he turned back to look at Claire, still in handcuffs. His expression was impossible to read. Shock, maybe. Confusion. Something else underneath. Then the ambulance doors closed and they were gone. The officer who'd cuffed Claire was talking into his radio. Need to verify her credentials. Says she's a doctor, but she's working as a waitress at... He paused, listening. Yeah, I'll bring her in. Am I being arrested? Claire asked. That depends on whether the father presses charges. For now, we need a statement. They took her to the station, sat her in a windowless room that smelled like bad coffee and disinfectant. The handcuffs came off, leaving red marks on her wrists. A detective arrived, older guy, tired eyes, coffee stain on his tie. Claire Bennett, he said, reading from a file. Age 30. You told the officers you're a doctor. I was. Claire folded her hands on the table. I had a medical license, past tense. Why past tense? She didn't answer. The detective flipped through pages. We ran your name, found some interesting things. You went to med school at Johns Hopkins, top of your class, surgical residency at Seattle Grace, published research on trauma procedures. He looked up. That's a hell of a resume for someone serving eggs at a diner. I left medicine. Why? Personal reasons. Those personal reasons wouldn't have anything to do with what happened to Daniel Carver, would they? The name hit Claire like cold water. She kept her face neutral, but her stomach twisted. That was 3 years ago, she said quietly. 18-year-old kid. Came into the ER after a car accident. You were the attending surgeon. I remember. The family sued the hospital, claimed negligence. The case settled out of court and you disappeared from medicine entirely. The detective leaned forward. What happened in that operating room, Dr. Bennett? I don't have a license anymore. Don't call me doctor. But you performed surgery today with a steak knife. That was an emergency field procedure. The girl would have died. And Daniel Carver? Would he have died too if you'd done something different? Claire's hands clenched under the table. Daniel Carver died because I missed something. I made a judgment call and I was wrong and a kid died. That's what happened. The hospital cleared you of wrongdoing. The hospital protected itself. I knew the truth. The detective studied her for a long moment. So, you've been punishing yourself for 3 years. Hiding. Pretending you're not capable of saving lives. I'm not pretending anything. I quit because I couldn't trust myself anymore. And yet today you trusted yourself enough to cut into a teenage girl's chest with a kitchen knife. Claire looked away. There wasn't time to second guess. The detective closed the file. The girl's stable. Her father's at the hospital with her. The paramedics said what you did was extraordinary. Probably saved her life. He stood up. You're free to go, Dr. Bennett, but I suspect you're going to be hearing from that father again. People like him don't forget debts. Claire walked out of the police station into afternoon rain. Her dress was still stained. Her hands were still shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up. She'd saved a life today. And all she could think about was the life she hadn't saved 3 years ago. Daniel Carver had been 18. Bright kid. Scholarship to USC. He'd been driving home from graduation practice when a drunk driver ran a red light. Massive internal bleeding. Claire had operated for 6 hours, but she'd missed a small tear in his mesenteric artery. He'd bled out during recovery. The family had been devastated. The hospital had circled wagons protecting their star surgeon, but Claire had known. She'd missed it. Her fault. Her failure. She'd resigned the next day. And now, 3 years later, she'd just performed emergency surgery on a diner floor in front of witnesses and police and people recording on their phones. Her phone buzzed. A text from Murray. Cops came back and took the security footage. Said the father wants copies. You okay? Claire didn't respond. She walked to the bus stop, waited in the rain, and rode home to her studio apartment that smelled like mildew and old carpet. She didn't turn on the lights, just sat on the edge of her bed and stared at her hands in the darkness. They were still steady. They'd remembered exactly what to do, and that scared her more than anything else. Sit. 3 days later, Claire was clearing tables at the Rusty Fork when a black Mercedes pulled up outside. She watched through the window as a driver got out, opened an umbrella, and walked around to open the passenger door. Ethan Calloway stepped out. Claire's stomach dropped. She grabbed her order pad and retreated behind the counter, hoping he'd come in, look around, not see her, and leave. But he came straight to the counter, looked directly at her. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "we need to talk." Up close, he looked different than he had that morning, less frantic, more composed. But there was something in his eyes, exhaustion maybe, or guilt. "If this is about charges," Claire said quietly, "I already spoke to the police." "It's not about charges. It's about my daughter." Vernon was watching from his usual booth. Murray had stopped cooking to stare through the kitchen window. "How is she?" Claire asked, because she couldn't help herself. "Alive. Because of you." Ethan set a business card on the counter. "I need to hire you." Claire blinked. "Excuse me?" "Sophie has been sick for months. Weakness, fainting spells, breathing problems. We've seen 6 specialists. Nobody can tell me what's wrong. But you looked at her once and knew exactly what was happening." "I got lucky." "No." His voice was firm. "You're trained, highly trained. The paramedics said what you did was extraordinary. I looked into your background, Johns Hopkins, Seattle Grace. You were one of the best trauma surgeons in the city." Was being the operative word. "I don't care about the past. I care about my daughter's future." He pushed the card closer. "I'm offering you a job. Private physician for Sophie. You'll live at my estate, full room and board, salary of $400,000 a year." Claire stared at him. $400,000. She made $22,000 working at the diner. "No," she said. "You haven't heard the full offer." "I don't need to. I'm not a doctor anymore." "Then what are you?" His voice had an edge now. "A waitress? You really want to spend the rest of your life serving coffee when you could be saving lives?" "You don't know anything about me. I know you walked away from medicine after Daniel Carver died. I know the hospital cleared you, but you blamed yourself anyway. I know you've been hiding for 3 years. He leaned forward. "And I know you saved my daughter's life without hesitation, when it mattered." Claire's hands gripped the counter. "I'm not interested in working for rich families with complicated problems. My problem isn't complicated. My daughter is dying, and I don't know why. Every doctor I've hired has been useless, but you saw something in 30 seconds that they missed in months. That was one emergency. It doesn't mean I can—" "Please." The word stopped her. Not demanded, not expected, just asked. Ethan Calloway looked at her across the counter of a cheap diner, and for the first time she saw him as something other than the arrogant man who'd barked orders at his daughter that morning. She saw a father who was desperate and terrified and out of options. "Just meet her," he said quietly. "Come to the house. Spend one afternoon. Look at her medical records. If you still want to say no after that, I'll respect it." Claire should have said no immediately. Should have sent him away. Should have protected the quiet, invisible life she'd built. But she kept seeing the girl's face. Sophie. Collapsed in the hallway, blue lips, struggling to breathe. She kept seeing all the signs she'd noticed in 30 seconds that 6 specialists had apparently missed. "One afternoon," she heard herself say. "That's all." Ethan's shoulders dropped with relief. "Tomorrow. I'll send a car at noon." He left the business card and walked out. The Mercedes pulled away into traffic. Murray poked his head through the kitchen window. "You just agreed to work for a billionaire?" "I agreed to one visit." "Claire, that guy was Ethan Calloway. Calloway Industries. He's like stupid rich." "I know." "And you're going to tell him no?" Claire picked up the business card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. Everything about it screamed money and power and exactly the kind of life she'd tried to escape. "Probably," she said. But she slipped the card into her pocket anyway. The estate was 45 minutes outside Seattle, perched on a cliff overlooking the Sound. Claire sat in the back of the Mercedes, watching trees give way to manicured grounds, and wondered what the hell she was doing. The driver, silent, professional, pulled up to a house that looked more like a museum, all glass and steel and architectural angles that probably had names she didn't know. A woman met her at the door, 50s, elegant, gray hair in a perfect twist. "Ms. Bennett, I'm Mrs. Chen, the house manager. Mr. Calloway is waiting in his office." Claire followed her through rooms that were beautiful and cold, filled with art that probably cost more than Claire would make in a lifetime. Everything was perfect. Everything was curated. Everything felt wrong. Ethan's office was on the second floor, overlooking the water. He stood when she entered, gesturing to a chair. "Thank you for coming." Claire sat stiffly. "Where's Sophie?" "Resting. She had a difficult night." He pulled out a thick file. "These are her medical records. 6 specialists, dozens of tests, no answers." He spread papers across the desk. Blood work, imaging results, consultation notes. Claire's eyes moved over them automatically, her brain falling into patterns she'd tried to forget. "They think it's psychosomatic," Ethan said. "Stress, grief. They've recommended therapy." "Do you believe that?" "I don't know what to believe. Her mother died 4 years ago, cancer. Sophie was 12. She's never been the same." Claire kept reading. The test results were odd. Nothing definitively wrong, but nothing completely right either. Low-grade inflammation markers, intermittent electrolyte imbalances, occasional tachycardia. Has she been losing weight? Yes, significantly. Appetite? Comes and goes. Some days she eats normally, other days she can't keep anything down. Claire made notes on a pad Ethan provided. The collapsed lung. That's not psychosomatic. The doctor said it was spontaneous pneumothorax. Can happen to anyone, especially young women. Can, but combined with everything else, Claire trailed off, thinking, "I'd need to examine her, run my own tests." "Whatever you need." "I'm not agreeing to the job. Just to look, that's all." "Understood." He led her upstairs to Sophie's room, knocked quietly before opening the door. The girl was in bed, propped against pillows, reading a book. She looked up when they entered, and her eyes widened with recognition. "You," she said, "from the diner." "Hi, Sophie, I'm Claire." "You saved my life." The girl's voice was soft, uncertain. "Dad told me what you did." Claire moved closer, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. "How are you feeling?" "Tired, sore." Sophie touched her chest where the hospital had placed a proper chest tube. "They said you used a straw?" "It was all I had." "That's insane." But Sophie smiled a little. "Thank you." Claire pulled a chair beside the bed. "Your dad asked me to look at your medical records. Would it be okay if I asked you some questions?" Sophie glanced at her father, who nodded. "Okay." "When did you first start feeling sick?" "I don't know, maybe 6 months ago? It was gradual, just tired all the time. Then the headaches started." "What kind of headaches?" "Bad ones, like someone was squeezing my skull." Claire made mental notes. "Do they come at specific times?" "Usually in the morning, and after I eat sometimes." "After every meal?" "No, just some meals. I can't figure out the pattern." "Interesting." Claire filed that away. "Do you ever feel nauseous?" "A lot, yeah." "What about tremors? Shaking hands?" Sophie held up her hands. They were trembling slightly. "All the time now." Claire examined her, checked her eyes, her pulse, listened to her breathing. Sophie tolerated it patiently, and Claire got the sense this girl had been poked and prodded by so many doctors that one more didn't matter. But something felt off. Not with Sophie's body. With the room. Claire glanced around. Expensive furniture, custom bookshelves, everything a teenage girl could want. But there were odd things too. A glass of water on the nightstand that looked untouched, a tray of food barely eaten, and medications, so many medications. "What are these?" Claire picked up a bottle. "Dr. Reed prescribed them," Ethan said, "for the anxiety." Claire read the label. Benzodiazepines. Strong dose. She picked up another bottle. Beta blockers. Another. Some supplement she didn't recognize. Who's Dr. Reed? Our family physician. He's been treating Sophie since her mother died. Claire set the bottles down carefully. Too many medications, too many variables. If Sophie was having adverse reactions, it would be impossible to determine which drug was causing what. I'd like to see Dr. Reed's notes, she said. Of course. Sophie yawned, her eyes drooping. Sorry, I get so tired. That's okay, rest. Claire stood. Thank you for talking with me. Will you come back? Sophie asked, her voice small. Claire hesitated. I don't know. Please. I like talking to you. You didn't treat me like I'm crazy. The words hit Claire harder than they should have. She remembered what it felt like to have people doubt you, to question whether your pain was real. I'll come back, she heard herself say. Ethan walked her downstairs. Well? Something's wrong, Claire said carefully. I don't know what yet, but this isn't anxiety. This isn't grief. Will you take the job? Claire stopped in the foyer, surrounded by marble and wealth and a life so far from hers it might as well be a different planet. She should say no, should walk away, should go back to the diner in the safety of invisibility. But Sophie's voice echoed in her head. I like talking to you. You didn't treat me like I'm crazy. I need to review all the records, Claire said, and I want to meet Dr. Reed, and I'm not promising anything beyond a consultation. But you'll consider it? Claire looked at him. Really looked, saw the desperation, the fear, the love for his daughter underneath all the money and power. I'll consider it, she said. She left before she could change her mind. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She lay in her studio apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and thought about Sophie. About the medical records that didn't quite make sense. About the medications that seemed excessive. About the pattern she couldn't quite see yet, but felt hovering just beyond her reach. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Ethan Calloway. Dr. Reed can meet with you tomorrow at 2 p.m. if you're available. I've also arranged for you to have full access to Sophie's medical files. Claire stared at the message. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. She was supposed to work the dinner shift. She texted back, I'll be there. Then she called Murray and quit her job at the Rusty Fork. Because somewhere between the diner floor and that mansion bedroom, Claire had stopped running, and the shy waitress nobody noticed was about to become someone else entirely. Dr. Marcus Reed arrived at the Calloway estate in a Jaguar that probably cost more than Claire's entire education. She watched from the library window as he stepped out, smoothing his silver hair, checking his reflection in the car window before walking to the door. Everything about him screamed expensive. The tailored suit, the Italian shoes, the watch that caught sunlight like a small sun. Claire had spent the morning reviewing Sophie's files in Ethan's library, surrounded by leather-bound books nobody read and art nobody really looked at. The records told a story, but not the one the doctors thought they were telling. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. Dr. Reed is here, Ms. Bennett. Thank you. Claire gathered her notes and headed downstairs, her stomach tight with nerves she hadn't felt in years. She'd reviewed cases before, consulted with other physicians. But that was when she'd had credentials and authority and the weight of a hospital behind her. Now she was just a former surgeon who'd quit in disgrace, about to question a man who'd probably never been questioned in his life. Ethan met her in the foyer with Dr. Reed, who looked at Claire the way people look at things they've stepped in. This is Claire Bennett, Ethan said. She's consulting on Sophie's case. Reed's eyebrows lifted slightly. Consulting? I wasn't aware we needed consultation. After what happened last week, I think a second opinion is warranted. The pneumothorax was a fluke, spontaneous. These things happen. Reed turned to Claire with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. No offense, Ms. Bennett, but I've been treating the Calloway family for 15 years. I know Sophie's medical history intimately. Then maybe you can help me understand something, Claire said evenly. Sophie's been on 7 different medications for 6 months. That's a lot for a teenage girl with no definitive diagnosis. Reed's smile thinned. Those medications are managing her symptoms, or creating new ones. The air in the foyer went cold. Ethan looked between them, clearly uncomfortable. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office, he said. They moved to the study, Claire, Ethan, and Reed, who settled into a chair like he owned it. Claire remained standing, her notes in hand. Walk me through your treatment plan, she said to Reed. I'm sorry, who are you exactly? Reed's voice had an edge now. Ethan mentioned you're a consultant, but I don't see any credentials. Are you even licensed? No, Claire said simply. I'm not. Then with all due respect, I don't see why I should be justifying my medical decisions to someone without standing. Because that someone saved your patient's life when you missed a tension pneumothorax. Reed's face flushed. I wasn't present when that happened. Had I been there, you would have done what? You've been treating her for months and never caught the warning signs. Asymmetric breathing, subcutaneous emphysema, these things don't appear instantly. You're making assumptions based on a single emergency. I'm making observations based on 6 months of records that don't add up. Claire opened her folder. Sophie's symptoms have been getting progressively worse since you started her on this medication regimen. Have you considered that the treatments might be contributing to her decline? That's absurd. Is it? Look at the timeline. Claire spread papers across Ethan's desk. January, she starts on the benzodiazepines. February, the tremors begin. March, you add beta blockers. April, the fainting starts. May, you add this supplement I've never heard of. She picked up a printout. What is Vitaplex 7? A proprietary formulation, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, completely harmless. Completely unregulated, you mean? It's not FDA approved. Reed stood abruptly. Ethan, I've been patient, but I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by someone who isn't even a practicing physician. Whatever happened in your past that made you leave medicine is your business, but don't project your failures onto my treatment. The words landed like a slap. Claire felt her face go hot. Ethan stood too. Marcus, that's enough. No, it's not enough. You bring in some random woman who performed a barbaric procedure with a kitchen knife, and now you're questioning my judgment. I've kept this family healthy for years. I was here when Caroline was dying. I held Sophie's hand through the worst of her grief. Where were you? He looked at Claire. Serving coffee and running from your mistakes. Claire's hands clenched around her notes. Part of her wanted to walk out, let Reed have his patient, go back to invisibility. But she thought of Sophie upstairs, getting sicker while nobody listened. You're right, she said quietly. I did run from my mistakes. I made a judgment call that killed someone, and I couldn't live with that. But at least I acknowledged it. Can you say the same? I haven't killed anyone. Haven't you? Claire met his eyes. Sophie's dying, slowly, and you're so busy defending your treatment plan that you won't consider the possibility that you're wrong. Get out, Reed said coldly. Marcus, Ethan started. No. Either she leaves or I do. And if I leave, I'm taking my records and my knowledge of this family's medical history with me. Good luck finding someone else who'll put up with... He gestured vaguely at everything. All of this. Ethan looked at Claire, conflict written across his face. She could see the calculation happening. Reed had been with the family for years, had history, had credentials, had everything Claire didn't. I'll go, Claire said before Ethan could speak. But I want it noted that I recommended a full medication review and independent testing. She gathered her papers and walked out, her heart hammering against her ribs. She made it to the foyer before Ethan caught up with her. Claire, wait. It's fine. He's right. I don't have standing. I shouldn't have. He's afraid, Ethan said. That's why he's defensive. You saw something in minutes that he missed in months. That terrifies him. Doesn't matter. He's your doctor. He was my wife's doctor too, and she died anyway. Ethan's voice was rough. I trusted him completely, believed everything he said, and Caroline still died. Claire stopped, turned to look at him. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to make the same mistake twice. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Stay, please. I'll deal with Reed. But I need you here. Sophie needs you here. Ethan, I can't practice medicine. I'm not licensed. If something goes wrong, then it goes wrong. But at least I'll know we tried everything. He looked at her with those exhausted, desperate eyes. Please, 1 week. Just stay for 1 week and see if you can figure out what's happening to my daughter. Claire should have said no, should have walked out the door and never looked back. Instead, she heard herself say, 1 week, but I need complete access, all records, all medications, and Reed doesn't interfere. Done. And I want Sophie off everything except absolute essentials. We need a clean baseline. Ethan hesitated. Reed won't like that. Reed doesn't have to like it. This is your daughter. Your choice. For a long moment, Ethan just looked at her. Then he nodded. I'll tell him. The next 3 days were chaos. Reed left in a fury, taking his Jaguar and his wounded pride with him. Ethan hired Claire officially as a medical consultant, the paperwork carefully worded to avoid claiming she was practicing medicine. Mrs. Chen set up a guest suite for her on the same floor as Sophie's room. Claire moved in with one suitcase and a sense of impending disaster. She started by taking Sophie off every medication except the chest tube antibiotics. The girl was skeptical at first. Dr. Reed said I need these, Sophie said, looking at the pill bottles Claire had collected. Dr. Reed might be wrong. He's been my doctor since I was 12. I know, but sometimes doctors get attached to their treatment plans. They keep adding things instead of stepping back and asking what's actually wrong. Sophie picked at her blanket. What if I get worse without them? Then we'll know the medications were helping. But if you get better... Claire left the implication hanging. You think the pills are making me sick? I think we need to find out. Claire set up a monitoring system, temperature checks every 4 hours, detailed food and symptom journal, daily blood pressure and pulse. She became Sophie's shadow, watching everything, noting everything. The first day off medications, Sophie slept 16 hours. The second day, she woke up with a headache so severe she vomited. The third day, something changed. Claire was sitting in Sophie's room reviewing notes when the girl suddenly said, I'm hungry. Claire looked up. What? I'm actually hungry, like real hunger, not just my dad forcing me to eat. It was the first time in months Sophie had initiated eating. Claire helped her downstairs to the kitchen where Mrs. Chen made soup and fresh bread. Sophie ate slowly, cautiously, but she finished the bowl. How do you feel? Claire asked. Weird, my head still hurts, but... Sophie paused, searching for words. I don't feel as foggy, like someone turned up the brightness in my brain. Claire made a note. Cognitive improvement after cessation of benzodiazepines. Possible oversedation. But that didn't explain everything. The weight loss, the intermittent symptoms, the pattern she couldn't quite see. That evening, Ethan found Claire in the library, surrounded by medical journals and Sophie's files spread across 3 tables. You look like you haven't slept, he said. Claire glanced up. Have you? Not much. He set down a coffee cup beside her. Peace offering. Mrs. Chen said you've been in here for 6 hours. Claire took the coffee gratefully. It was good, real espresso, not the diner sludge she was used to. Sophie ate today, she said. Real food. Without being forced. Ethan's expression shifted. Really? She's still symptomatic, but there's improvement. Claire hesitated. I need to ask you something. Has anyone else been giving Sophie medication besides Reed? Like who? I don't know, someone with access to her. Someone who might think they're helping. Ethan frowned. Mrs. Chen manages her medications. Why? Because I found this. Claire pulled out a small bottle from the pile. It's not on any of Reed's prescriptions. I found it in Sophie's bathroom, hidden behind the other bottles. Ethan took it, reading the label. Vitaplex 7. Reed mentioned that. The supplement. He said it was vitamins, but I had a pharmacist friend analyze the label ingredients. Claire pulled out a printout. It contains heavy metals, not toxic levels individually, but combined with everything else Sophie was taking, it could cause cumulative toxicity. You think that's what's making her sick? I think it's part of it, but someone's been giving it to her consistently. The bottle's almost empty, and it was filled last month. Reed prescribed it. Did he? Or did someone else suggest it? Claire met his eyes. Who else has regular access to Sophie? Ethan's face went pale. You think someone in this house is deliberately making her sick? I think we need to consider all possibilities. Before Ethan could respond, Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her face white. Mr. Calloway, you need to come upstairs. It's Sophie. They ran. Sophie was in her bathroom, collapsed on the floor, vomiting blood into the toilet. Her face was gray, her hands shaking violently. Claire dropped to her knees beside her. Sophie, can you hear me? The girl nodded weakly. What did you eat? Dinner. Mrs. Chen made chicken. Claire's mind raced. They'd all eaten the same chicken. If it was food poisoning, they'd all be sick, unless... Did you take anything? Any medication? No, just... Vanessa said... Sophie's eyes rolled back. Claire caught her before she hit the floor. Call 911, now. Ethan was already on the phone. Claire checked Sophie's pulse, rapid, thready. Her pupils were dilated unevenly. Who's Vanessa? Claire demanded. My fiancée, Ethan said, his voice hollow. She's been staying here on weekends. Where is she now? Downstairs, she was... He stopped. She made Sophie tea. Before dinner. Said it would help with her appetite. Claire's blood went cold. Get me that tea, the cup she used. Don't let Vanessa leave. Mrs. Chen rushed out. Claire turned Sophie onto her side as the girl vomited again, this time barely conscious. Stay with me, Claire said. Sophie, stay with me. The ambulance took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of Claire doing everything she could to keep Sophie stable, while Ethan paced and Mrs. Chen wrung her hands, and somewhere downstairs, Vanessa Sinclair was apparently asking what all the fuss was about. The paramedics, the same ones from the diner, recognized Claire immediately. You again? The woman said, but she was already moving, checking Sophie's vitals. Possible poisoning, Claire said. Unknown substance. She's been vomiting blood for 8 minutes. Neurological symptoms, altered consciousness, uneven pupils. They got Sophie on a gurney, started an IV, loaded her into the ambulance. Ethan climbed in after them. I'm coming, Claire said. No. Ethan's voice was hard. Stay here. Find out what she drank. I need to know what we're dealing with. The ambulance left, sirens wailing into the night. Claire stood in the driveway, her hands shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up. Then she turned and walked back into the house. She found Vanessa in the living room, elegant in a designer dress, looking irritated. What on earth is happening? Vanessa demanded. Ethan just left without explaining anything. Sophie's been poisoned, Claire said flatly. Vanessa's face went carefully blank. Poisoned? That's absurd. She probably just ate something that disagreed with her. Where's the tea you gave her? I don't know what you're talking about. Before dinner, you made her tea. I make her tea every time I'm here. She likes chamomile. Show me. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. I'm sorry, who are you to be giving orders in Ethan's house? I'm the person who's going to find out what you gave that girl. You can show me voluntarily, or I can call the police and let them search. For a moment, something flickered across Vanessa's face. Fear, maybe. Or calculation. Then she smiled. Of course. If it will put everyone's mind at ease. She led Claire to the kitchen, moving with unhurried grace, pointed to a teacup in the sink, already washed. There, chamomile, just like always. Claire picked up the cup. It smelled like chamomile, but there was something else underneath, something bitter. What else did you put in it? Nothing, just tea and honey. Honey from where? The cupboard, where it always is. Claire opened the cupboard, found a jar of expensive organic honey, opened it. It looked normal, smelled normal, but her instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Mrs. Chen, Claire called. The housekeeper appeared. Yes? Do you buy this honey? No, Ms. Sinclair brings it. She says it's special, from her family's estate. Claire looked at Vanessa, who was still smiling that perfect smile. I like to bring little touches from home, Vanessa said. Ethan appreciates it. Does Sophie eat this honey? Sometimes. In her tea. Why? Do you think organic honey is poisonous now? Claire set the jar down carefully. I'd like to have this tested. By all means, though I think you're being paranoid. Vanessa checked her watch. If you'll excuse me, I should get to the hospital. Ethan will need support. I'd prefer if you stayed here. Vanessa's smile disappeared. Excuse me? Until we know what made Sophie sick, I'd like everyone who had contact with her to remain available for questioning. You can't keep me here. You're not police. You're not even a real doctor anymore, are you? Vanessa's voice had turned sharp. I looked into you, Claire Bennett, failed surgeon playing Nancy Drew. You have no authority to tell me anything. Claire met her eyes. You're right, I have no authority. But I'm calling Detective Morrison, the one who interviewed me after the diner incident, and I'm asking him to investigate. You can wait here for him or explain to the police why you left right after Sophie was poisoned. Vanessa's face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong. Then you have nothing to worry about. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Vanessa grabbed her purse. I'm leaving. If the police want to talk to me, they can call my lawyer. She walked out, heels clicking on marble. A moment later, a car engine started, then faded into the distance. Mrs. Chen looked at Claire. Should we have stopped her? We couldn't legally, but we have the honey. Claire picked up the jar. And I'm betting it's not just honey. She spent the next hour on the phone. First with Detective Morrison, who agreed to open an investigation. Then with a toxicology lab that could rush testing. Then with the hospital, where Sophie was in intensive care, her condition critical but stable. Ethan called at midnight. They're pumping her stomach, he said, his voice wrecked. They don't know what she ingested. They're treating blind. I have the teacup and the honey, Claire said. I sent them to a lab. We'll have results by morning. Vanessa left. I know I couldn't stop her legally. I don't understand. Ethan sounded lost. Why would she hurt Sophie? What could she possibly gain? Claire had been thinking about that. How much is Sophie worth? Silence. Then, what? If something happened to Sophie, where would her inheritance go? There is no inheritance. Sophie's a minor. Everything is in trust until she's 25. If she dies before then, he stopped. It goes to her legal guardian. Which is? Me. But if I remarry before Sophie turns 18, my spouse would have partial claim if something happened to me. The pieces clicked into place. When were you planning to marry Vanessa? Next month. His voice was hollow. We were going to have a small ceremony. Sophie wasn't well enough for anything big. Sophie wasn't well because someone was making sure she stayed sick. You think Vanessa… No, that's insane. She loves Sophie. Does she? Or does she love what Sophie represents? Ethan didn't answer. Claire stared out the window at the dark estate grounds. The honey needs to be tested, and we need to look at everything Vanessa has given Sophie over the past 6 months. Every gift, every supplement, every act of kindness. I trusted her, Ethan said quietly. I know. I brought her into my home. Let her near my daughter. You couldn't have known. I should have. I should have seen. His voice cracked. What kind of father am I? Claire closed her eyes. She understood that guilt, that crushing sense of failure. She'd lived with it for 3 years. The kind who's trying, she said softly. That's all any of us can do. The lab results came back at 6 in the morning. The honey contained foxglove extract, digitalis, a cardiac glycoside that, in small doses over time, would cause exactly the symptoms Sophie had been experiencing. Weakness, nausea, visual disturbances, cardiac arrhythmias. In larger doses, it was lethal. Claire called Detective Morrison immediately, then Ethan, then the hospital, where Sophie was slowly stabilizing now that they knew what they were treating. By noon, police had issued a warrant for Vanessa Sinclair's arrest. They found her at the airport, about to board a flight to Paris. Claire watched the news coverage from the hospital waiting room where she'd been sitting for 8 hours. Vanessa being led away in handcuffs, her perfect facade finally cracking, screaming about lawyers and false accusations, and how they'd all regret this. Ethan appeared beside Claire, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. She confessed, he said numbly. Not officially, but she told her lawyer everything. She's been poisoning Sophie for months, small doses, enough to make her sick, but not obviously dying. She wanted Sophie weak, wanted me desperate, wanted to be the supportive partner who stood by me through crisis. And then, once we were married, she would have increased the doses, made it look like Sophie's condition was deteriorating despite everyone's best efforts, a tragic loss. And I'd turned to my new wife for comfort, never knowing she was the one who killed my daughter. Claire felt sick. What about Dr. Reed? He didn't know, but Vanessa had been feeding him information, suggesting symptoms, guiding his treatment. He thought he was helping. Instead, he was… Ethan's voice broke. He was poisoning her with medication she didn't need while Vanessa poisoned her with everything else. It's not your fault. Isn't it? I chose Vanessa. I trusted her. I let her into our lives. You were lonely, grieving. She manipulated that. Ethan sank into the chair beside her. Sophie could have died, but she didn't, because you brought me in. Because you question things. You question things. I just wanted someone to fix it. He looked at her. You saved her life. Twice now. Don't. His voice was fierce. Don't diminish what you did. You saw what 6 specialists missed. You pushed back when everyone else accepted the easy answers. You saved my daughter's life twice, and His voice cracked. I will never be able to repay that. Claire didn't know what to say. So she just sat there, shoulder to shoulder with this broken father in a hospital waiting room, while somewhere upstairs, his daughter fought to recover from months of slow poisoning. A doctor appeared in the doorway. Mr. Calloway, you can see Sophie now. They went up together. Sophie was awake, pale but alert, hooked up to monitors that beeped steadily. Hey, Dad, she said weakly. Ethan rushed to her bedside, taking her hand carefully, like she might break. Hey, baby, how are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, but better than yesterday. Her eyes found Claire. They told me about Vanessa, about the honey. I'm sorry, Ethan said. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. How could you? I didn't see it either. She was nice to me. She brought me tea and asked about school, and Sophie's voice broke. She was trying to kill me. I know. Why? Money. Control. I don't know if she even knows why. Ethan stroked her hair. But she can't hurt you anymore, I promise. Sophie looked at Claire. You figured it out. Not fast enough. Fast enough that I'm alive. Sophie managed a weak smile. That's twice now you've saved me. I'm starting to think you're like my guardian angel or something. Claire felt her throat tighten. I'm really not. Yeah, you are. The universe put you in that diner the exact moment I needed you, then brought you here when I needed you again. That's not coincidence. That's not how the universe works. Maybe not, but I'm glad it worked out this way. Sophie squeezed her father's hand, then reached for Claire's. Thank you for not giving up on me when everyone else did. Claire held the girl's hand, this fragile teenager who'd survived months of poisoning and a collapsed lung, and doctors who couldn't see what was right in front of them. You're welcome, she said softly. She stayed at the hospital for 3 more days while Sophie recovered. Ethan barely left his daughter's side, and Claire found herself orbiting them both, consulting with doctors, reviewing treatment plans, making sure nobody missed anything else. Dr. Reed came to apologize on the 2nd day. He looked smaller, somehow, diminished. I should have listened to you, he said to Claire in the hallway outside Sophie's room. I was arrogant, defensive, and I nearly killed my patient because of it. You didn't know about the poisoning, but I should have known something was wrong. I should have questioned my own treatment when it wasn't working. He met her eyes. Why did you see it when I didn't? Claire considered this question. Because I wasn't invested in being right. I was invested in finding the truth. That's what I should have been doing. Yeah, it is. He left shortly after, and Claire never saw him again. She heard later that he'd retired from private practice, moved to a clinic where he could do less harm. On the 4th day, Sophie was cleared to go home. They returned to the estate in the afternoon, the Mercedes winding through gates that now felt less like sanctuary and more like a cage where terrible things had happened. But Sophie seemed lighter somehow, free of toxins, free of the woman who'd been slowly killing her, free of the fog that had clouded her mind for months. I'm hungry, she announced as they pulled up to the house. Like, really hungry. Can Mrs. Chen make lasagna? Ethan laughed. Actually laughed. She can make whatever you want. That evening, Claire sat in her guest suite packing her single suitcase. The week was over. Sophie was safe. The crisis had passed. It was time to leave. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Ethan entered, looking uncertain. You're leaving. That was the deal. 1 week. Sophie's asking for you. She wants you to stay for dinner. Ethan, I know. You have your life. I'm not asking you to stay forever. Just dinner, please. Claire looked at her half-packed suitcase, then at this father who'd been through hell and was still standing. Okay, she said. Dinner. They ate in the dining room, Claire, Ethan, Sophie, and Mrs. Chen, who'd insisted on joining them. The lasagna was perfect. The conversation was light. Nobody mentioned Vanessa or poisoning or the months of hell they'd all survived. It felt almost normal. After dinner, Sophie pulled Claire aside. I don't want you to go, she said quietly. I have to. This isn't my life. It could be. Sophie looked at her with those two old eyes. You're good at this. Helping people, solving puzzles, you belong in medicine. I left medicine for a reason. Because you made a mistake, one mistake, and you've been punishing yourself ever since. Sophie's voice was gentle but firm. You saved my life twice. That has to count for something. Claire felt tears prickling at her eyes. I don't know if I can trust myself again. You already do. You trusted yourself in that diner. You trusted yourself when you took me off all those medications. You trusted yourself to figure out what was wrong when nobody else could. Sophie took her hand. Maybe it's time to trust yourself to move forward. That night, Claire lay in the guest bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about trust and second chances and the shy waitress who'd been hiding for 3 years. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Thank you for everything. The offer still stands, whatever you decide. Claire stared at the message for a long time. Then she got up, unpacked her suitcase, and walked to the window overlooking the sound. The shy waitress nobody noticed was gone. And someone else, someone stronger, someone ready to fight, was taking her place. Claire woke to sunlight streaming through windows that cost more than her old apartment and the distant sound of Sophie laughing somewhere downstairs. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality settled back in. The estate, the guest suite, the decision she'd made at 3 a.m. to stay. She checked her phone. 7 missed calls from Murray at the diner, probably wondering why she hadn't shown up for her shifts. A text from Detective Morrison about Vanessa's arraignment, and a message from an unknown number that made her stomach drop. Dr. Bennett, this is Lawrence Mitchum from Seattle Medical Board. We need to discuss your recent activities. Please call at your earliest convenience. Claire stared at the message. Someone had reported her, probably Reed covering his own liability, or maybe Vanessa's lawyer looking for ammunition. It didn't matter who. What mattered was that the board knew she'd been practicing without a license. She could lose everything, not that she had much to lose anymore. A knock at the door pulled her from her spiraling thoughts. Claire? Sophie's voice, bright and energetic in a way Claire hadn't heard before. Mrs. Chen made French toast. You have to come try it. Claire opened the door to find Sophie standing there in pajamas, her color better, her eyes clearer, a different person than the dying girl from 2 weeks ago. You look good, Claire said. I feel good. Like actually good. Not just pretending I'm fine good. Sophie grabbed her hand. Come on, before Dad eats it all. They went downstairs together, and Claire found herself at the breakfast table with Ethan and Sophie like this was normal, like she belonged here. Ethan was reading the newspaper, glasses perched on his nose, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Sophie was texting someone, smiling at her phone. It felt like a family, which was dangerous because Claire wasn't family. She was temporary help, a consultant, someone who'd be gone as soon as the crisis passed. Coffee? Mrs. Chen asked, appearing with a pot. Please. The French toast was perfect. Everything Mrs. Chen made was perfect, which should have been comforting, but instead reminded Claire that she didn't belong in a world where breakfast was an art form. I have meetings in the city today, Ethan said, folding his newspaper. But I should be back by 6. Sophie, you have that appointment with Dr. Warner at 2. Do I have to? Sophie made a face. I feel fine. You just recovered from months of poisoning. Yes, you have to. Can Claire come with me? Both of them looked at her. Claire set down her coffee carefully. I'm not sure that's appropriate. Dr. Warner is your new physician. You should establish a relationship with him without... Please, Sophie interrupted. I trust you, and Dr. Warner doesn't know my history like you do. Sophie has a point, Ethan said. You know her case better than anyone. It might help Dr. Warner to have your input. Claire wanted to say no, wanted to establish boundaries, but Sophie was looking at her with those hopeful eyes, and Claire found herself nodding. Okay, I'll come. After breakfast, Claire retreated to the library to call the medical board. Lawrence Mitchum answered on the second ring. Dr. Bennett, thank you for calling back. I'm not a doctor anymore, Mr. Mitchum. I surrendered my license 3 years ago. Yes, we're aware, which is why we're concerned about reports that you've been providing medical care to a minor. Claire's grip tightened on the phone. I provided emergency care in a life-threatening situation that's protected under Good Samaritan laws. The emergency care is not the issue. It's the ongoing treatment, the consultation, the medication management. I was hired as a consultant, not as a physician. The distinction is technical, Dr. Bennett. You provided medical advice that influenced treatment decisions. That crosses the line into practicing medicine without a license. Claire closed her eyes. What happens now? We're opening an investigation. You'll need to provide a statement. If we find evidence of unlicensed practice, there could be criminal charges. Criminal charges for saving a girl's life? For practicing medicine without authorization. The motivation doesn't change the law. His voice softened slightly. I understand you were in a difficult position, but there are protocols, legal protections. You bypassed all of them. Because a girl was dying and I was the only one who saw it. That may be true, but it doesn't make your actions legal. After he hung up, Claire sat in the library, staring at nothing. She'd known this was coming. Had known the moment she cut into Sophie with that steak knife that she was risking everything. But knowing and facing it were different things. Bad news? She looked up. Ethan was standing in the doorway, concern etched across his face. The medical board is investigating me for practicing without a license. Ethan stepped into the room. That's ridiculous. You saved Sophie's life. Twice. Which makes it worse legally. The first time could be excused as emergency intervention, but staying here, managing her care, taking her off medications, that's practicing medicine. I'll get my lawyers involved. We'll fight this. Ethan, no, you can't. Yes, I can. You helped my daughter when no one else would. I'm not letting some bureaucratic nonsense punish you for that. Claire stood, frustration rising. It's not nonsense, it's the law. And it exists for good reasons. What if I'd been wrong? What if taking Sophie off those medications had killed her? But you weren't wrong. This time. But 3 years ago I was wrong, and a kid died because of it. Her voice cracked. I don't deserve a license. I proved that already. Ethan crossed the room, his expression fierce. One mistake doesn't define your entire career. You were an exceptional surgeon. Everyone says so. Everyone's being kind. No, they're being honest. I've spoken to your former colleagues, Dr. Patricia Hayes from Seattle. Grace says you were the best trauma surgeon she'd ever worked with. Dr. Yoon from Hopkins said you had instincts that couldn't be taught. Even the Carver family's lawyer admitted off the record that what happened was a rare complication, not negligence. Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes. Then why did I leave? Because you're human, because you made a mistake and couldn't forgive yourself. Ethan's voice gentled. But maybe it's time to try. Before Claire could respond, Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. Mr. Calloway, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. They went to the foyer where a woman in an expensive suit was waiting. She was around 40, perfectly composed, with a leather portfolio under her arm. Mr. Calloway, I'm Jessica Vance, representing Vanessa Sinclair. Ethan's expression hardened. You have a lot of nerve coming here. I understand this is difficult, but my client would like to make you an offer. Your client tried to murder my daughter. We have nothing to discuss. Ms. Sinclair is willing to plead guilty to lesser charges, reckless endangerment instead of attempted murder. In exchange, she'll provide a full confession and spare Sophie the trauma of testifying. No. The trial will be brutal, Mr. Calloway. Every detail of Sophie's illness will be examined. Every medication, every symptom, every private moment will become public record. Is that what you want for your daughter? Ethan took a step forward, his voice dangerously quiet. What I want is for your client to spend the rest of her life in prison for what she did. Think about Sophie. Think about what this will do to her. I'm thinking about Sophie, which is why your client can rot in hell for all I care. Jessica's expression didn't change. There's another matter. Ms. Sinclair claims that your consultant, she glanced at Claire, practiced medicine without a license. She's willing to drop that complaint if you agree to the plea deal. The room went silent. Claire felt ice in her stomach. This was the leverage. This was how Vanessa would get away with it. Get out, Ethan said. Mr. Calloway. I said get out. Tell your client she can make whatever complaint she wants. We're not negotiating with someone who tried to kill my daughter. Jessica studied him for a moment, then nodded. I'll relay your message, but think carefully about this decision. You're not the only one who'll pay the price." She left, her heels clicking on marble. Ethan turned to Claire. "She's bluffing." "No, she's not. The medical board already contacted me. Vanessa's complaint probably gave them the final push they needed to investigate. Then we fight it. I told you, I have lawyers." "Ethan, stop." Claire's voice was tired. "You can't fix this with money. Some things are beyond even billionaire resources. So what, you just accept it? Let them punish you for doing the right thing? Maybe I deserve to be punished. That's bullshit, and you know it." The anger in his voice surprised her. Ethan was usually so controlled, so measured, but now he looked furious. "You saved Sophie's life," he continued. "You saw what trained physicians missed. You stood up to Reed when everyone else let him continue hurting her. You figured out Vanessa was poisoning her before it was too late. And now you want to just, what? Apologize for being competent? I want to accept responsibility for my choices. Then accept responsibility for the good ones too, not just the mistakes." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't yell. This isn't your problem." "Actually, it is. I'm the one who chose to stay, who chose to get involved." Claire looked at him. "But I don't regret it. Even with everything happening now, I don't regret helping Sophie." Something shifted in Ethan's expression. "Good, because we need you. You have Dr. Warner now. Sophie will be fine. I'm not talking about medical care. I'm talking about family. Sophie needs you. He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "We both need you." The words hung between them, weighted with implications Claire wasn't ready to examine. Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed and ready. "Are we still going to Dr. Warner's?" Claire grabbed onto the distraction gratefully. "Yes. Let me get my bag." Dr. Warner's office was in a medical building downtown, all glass and modern art, and the smell of expensive air freshener. He was younger than Claire expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and an easy manner that immediately put Sophie at ease. "So," he said after the initial examination, "your chart reads like a medical thriller. Collapsed lung, heavy metal poisoning, medication toxicity. How are you feeling now?" "Better," Sophie said. "Way better. Claire took me off everything and suddenly I could think again." Dr. Warner looked at Claire with interest. "You're the consultant who identified the poisoning?" "I got lucky. According to the hospital reports, you performed a field decompression with improvised equipment. That's not luck. That's skill." Claire shifted uncomfortably. "I had training. Seattle Grace, right? I did my residency there. Different years, but everyone still talks about your work in trauma. You had a gift for seeing patterns no one else caught." Had being the operative word. "Why did you leave?" The question was gentle, but it still landed like a blow. Claire glanced at Sophie, who was pretending to look at her phone but obviously listening. "I made a mistake. Someone died because of it." Dr. Warner nodded slowly. "Daniel Carver. I remember that case. Terrible situation. But the review board cleared you." The review board protected the hospital. The review board did their job, which was to determine if negligence occurred. It didn't. He leaned forward. "I've seen the records. You did everything right. The mesenteric tear was microscopic. Even in autopsy, they almost missed it. 3 experienced pathologists examining the body with full knowledge of what to look for, and they almost missed it. But they didn't miss it, which means I should have caught it. You're human. Humans miss things. That's why we have teams and protocols and second opinions." He paused. "Can I ask you something? If a colleague came to you with the same situation, did everything right, followed every protocol, and still lost a patient to an undetectable complication, would you tell them they should quit medicine?" Claire opened her mouth, closed it. Because no, she wouldn't. She'd tell them it was tragic but not their fault. That medicine was full of tragedies that weren't anyone's fault. But that was different. That was someone else. "I see that look," Dr. Warner said. "That's different because it's me look. I've had it myself. We all have. But here's the thing, it's not different. You're not special. You're not uniquely capable of perfection. You're a highly trained physician who did her best, and sometimes best isn't enough." Sophie spoke up quietly. "She saved my life. Twice. Doesn't that count for something?" "It counts for everything," Dr. Warner said. "Which is why I'm going to ask you something, Ms. Bennett. Have you considered reinstating your license? Claire stared at him. That's not possible. I surrendered it voluntarily. Voluntarily, yes, but not because of disciplinary action. You could petition for reinstatement. It would require some paperwork, some continuing education credits, possibly a supervised practice period. But it's doable. The medical board is investigating me right now for practicing without a license. Because you're good at it. Because patients need you. He smiled. Sounds like the system trying to tell you something. On the drive home, Sophie was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Are you going to do it? Try to get your license back?" "I don't know." "You should." "Why?" "Because you're good at this. Like really good. And the world needs people who are good at saving lives." Sophie looked out the window. "My mom died because her cancer was too aggressive. The doctors did everything they could, but it wasn't enough. I watched her get sicker and sicker, and there was nothing anyone could do." Claire's chest tightened. "Sophie, si, but I didn't have to die. I was dying because someone was poisoning me, and nobody saw it except you. You saved me when all those fancy doctors with all their degrees couldn't." Sophie turned to look at her. "If you'd had your license, would you have been more willing to help? Or would you still have walked away?" The question cut straight through every excuse Claire had been making. "I don't know," she admitted. "I think you would have helped anyway, because it's who you are. The license doesn't matter. What matters is that you see things other people miss." Sophie paused. "But maybe having the license would make it easier, for you and for people who need help." They drove the rest of the way in silence, but Sophie's words echoed in Claire's head. Back at the estate, Claire found Ethan in his office, staring at his computer with a frown. "Bad news?" she asked. He looked up. "Vanessa's arraignment is tomorrow. The prosecutor wants to know if Sophie's well enough to give a statement." "Is she?" "I don't know. I don't want to put her through that." But Vanessa's lawyer is already spinning this as an unfortunate misunderstanding, claiming the honey was medicinal, not toxic, that Sophie's symptoms were psychosomatic and Vanessa was just trying to help with natural remedies. Claire felt anger rise in her throat. "That's insane. The lab results were clear. Lab results can be disputed. Expert witnesses can be bought. Reasonable doubt can be manufactured." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I know how this works. I've sat through enough corporate litigation to see how money changes outcomes. So what do? We let Sophie decide. If she wants to testify, we support her. If she doesn't, we find another way." That evening, they sat Sophie down in the living room, Claire, Ethan, and the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Diana Reeves, who'd been handling the case. "I need you to understand what this means," Diana said to Sophie. "If you testify, Vanessa's lawyer will try to discredit you. She'll suggest you were unstable, that you imagined things, that your father put ideas in your head." "She poisoned me," Sophie said flatly. "I know, and we can prove it, but a trial is different from truth. It's about what we can convince a jury of beyond reasonable doubt." Diana pulled out a folder. "If you testify, we have a strong case. Without you, we're relying on circumstantial evidence and expert testimony. It's winnable, but harder." Sophie looked at her father. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should do what feels right. Not what I want or what the prosecutor wants. What you want." Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to Claire. "What would you do?" Claire didn't hesitate. "I'd be terrified. Testifying is scary, especially against someone who hurt you, but I'd do it anyway, because silence protects the wrong people. Even if it was hard? Especially if it was hard. The things worth doing usually are." Sophie nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll testify." Diana looked relieved. "We'll prepare you. Make sure you're ready for whatever her lawyer throws at you." After Diana left, Sophie went upstairs to do homework, leaving Claire and Ethan alone. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly, "for being honest with her." "I just told her what I thought, which is more than most people do. Everyone's so busy protecting her, they forget she's strong enough to handle the truth." Claire settled onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. "She is strong, stronger than she knows. She learned it from you. She learned it from surviving. I had nothing to do with it." Ethan sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "You have everything to do with it. Before you came, She was fading, not just physically. She'd stopped fighting, stopped hoping, and then you showed up and suddenly she had someone who believed her, who took her seriously, who didn't treat her like a broken thing to be fixed. I just listened. That's more than anyone else did, including me. His voice was rough with guilt. I was so busy trying to hold everything together after Caroline died. The company, the household, Sophie's care. I didn't see that Sophie needed me to just be her father. Not a manager, not a fixer, just present. Claire understood that feeling. The need to do something, anything, to make the pain stop, even when doing something made things worse. "You're here now," she said, "because you made me see her, really see her." He turned to look at Claire. "You made me see a lot of things." The air between them shifted, became charged with something Claire wasn't ready to name. She stood abruptly. "I should check on Sophie, make sure she's okay after talking to the prosecutor." "Claire, good night, Ethan." She fled upstairs before he could say whatever he'd been about to say, before she had to acknowledge what was happening between them. But later that night, lying in the guest bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her. Like she was something precious, like she mattered. It terrified her. The next 3 weeks fell into a rhythm. Claire accompanied Sophie to doctor's appointments, helped her catch up on schoolwork she'd missed, and slowly rebuilt the girl's strength with carefully planned exercise and nutrition. Dr. Warner consulted with Claire regularly, treating her like the physician she used to be instead of the waitress she'd become. The medical board investigation hung over everything like a storm cloud. Claire had submitted her statement, explaining her actions and accepting full responsibility. Now she just had to wait. Vanessa's trial date was set for 6 weeks out. Sophie was preparing to testify, working with Diana to review her statement and practice handling hostile questions. And Claire was trying very hard not to think about what would happen when this was all over. When Sophie was healthy and the trial was done and there was no reason for her to stay. One evening, she found Sophie in the library, surrounded by textbooks and looking frustrated. "Calculus?" Claire guessed. "Derivatives. I hate them." "Want help?" "You know calculus. Pre-med requires it. I might remember some things." They worked through problems together, and Claire was surprised by how much she enjoyed it. The logic, the patterns, the satisfaction of finding solutions. It reminded her of diagnosis, taking symptoms, and working backward to find the cause. "You're good at this," Sophie said. "Teaching, I mean." "I'm just showing you what I remember." "No, you're making it make sense. My actual math teacher just writes formulas on the board and expects us to figure it out." Sophie closed her textbook. "Have you thought about what Dr. Warner said? About getting your license back?" "Some." "And?" Claire set down her pencil. "I don't know if I'm ready." "What would make you ready?" "I don't know that either." Sophie studied her for a moment. "Can I tell you something? You're going to think it's weird. Try me. When I was sick, like really sick, before we knew about Vanessa, I used to have this dream. I was drowning, and everyone was standing on the shore watching, but nobody was helping. They were just talking about me, discussing what to do, but nobody was actually doing anything. And I kept going under, and I was so tired, and I just wanted to stop fighting." Claire's throat tightened. "But then in the dream, someone jumped in," Sophie continued. "Someone who wasn't supposed to be there, who nobody expected, and she pulled me out. And when I woke up in that hospital after you did the chess thing with the straw, I realized the dream was real. You were the person who jumped in when everyone else just watched." "Sophie, I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty or obligated or whatever. I'm telling you because you saved my life, and now I want you to save yours. Stop drowning in guilt over something that happened 3 years ago. Jump into your own life and start living it again." The words hit Claire like a physical blow. She felt tears burning behind her eyes. "It's not that simple." "I know, but maybe it could be." Sophie stood, gathering her books. "Think about it, okay? Not for me or my dad. For you." After Sophie left, Claire sat in the library alone, staring at the calculus problems they'd been solving. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lawrence Mitchum at the medical board. "We've completed our investigation. I'd like to discuss our findings. Can you come to the office tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Claire's hands shook as she typed back a confirmation. This was it. The verdict on her future. She barely slept that night, and when morning came, she dressed in the one professional outfit she still owned, a blouse and slacks from her residency days that were slightly too loose now. Ethan found her in the kitchen, trying to force down coffee. "You look terrified," he said. "I am. Want me to come with you?" "To the medical board?" "No. That would just make it worse." "Then I'll be here when you get back." The simple statement steadied her. She nodded, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. The medical board offices were exactly as depressing as she remembered. Fluorescent lighting, industrial carpet, walls the color of despair. Lawrence Mitchum met her in the lobby, his expression unreadable. "Dr. Bennett, thank you for coming." "Ms. Bennett," she corrected automatically. "Actually, that's what I wanted to discuss." He led her to a conference room where two other board members were waiting, an older woman with gray hair and a middle-aged man with kind eyes. "We've completed our investigation into your activities," Mitchum began. "We've reviewed your statement, interviewed witnesses, and examined the medical records from Sophie Calloway's case." Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. "Our findings are as follows. You did perform medical procedures without a valid license, specifically the emergency decompression and subsequent care management. Under normal circumstances, this would result in criminal charges and a permanent ban on future licensure." Claire felt the floor drop out from under her. "However," Mitchum continued, "we also found that your actions directly saved a minor's life on two separate occasions. The emergency decompression was performed under duress with no viable alternative. The care management, while technically illegal, was conducted with appropriate caution and resulted in identifying a poisoning that licensed physicians had missed." The woman spoke up. "We also reviewed the Daniel Carver case, the one that led to your voluntary surrender of your license." Claire flinched. The board that reviewed that case made detailed findings. There was no negligence, no error in judgment. The complication was exceedingly rare and undetectable given the circumstances. You were cleared of any wrongdoing. "I know what they found," Claire said quietly. "I was there." "Then you also know you left medicine based on guilt, not fact. You punished yourself for something that wasn't your fault." The man leaned forward. "We've spoken with your former colleagues, Dr. Hayes, Dr. Yoon, the entire trauma department at Seattle Grace. They all say the same thing. You were exceptional, one of the best they'd ever worked with, and they'd welcome you back in a heartbeat." Claire didn't know what to say. Didn't know if she could speak past the lump in her throat. "We're not going to file charges," Mitchum said, "and we're going to do something unusual. We're recommending that you petition for reinstatement of your medical license." Claire blinked. "What?" "You clearly have the skill. You've demonstrated exceptional judgment under pressure. And patients need physicians like you, so we're formally recommending reinstatement pending completion of continuing education requirements and a supervised practice period." "I don't understand. I broke the law. You saved a life. 2 lives, actually. The law exists to protect patients, not punish people for helping them." The woman smiled. "Medicine needs people who are willing to break rules when those rules would result in death. But we'd prefer if you did it with a license next time." Claire sat there, stunned, as they outlined the requirements. 6 months of continuing education, a year of supervised practice, regular check-ins with the board. It was doable, completely doable. She could be a doctor again. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She left the building in a daze, standing on the sidewalk in downtown Seattle, trying to process what had just happened. Her phone rang. "Ethan." "How did it go?" "They're recommending reinstatement. I can get my license back." "Claire, that's incredible." "I don't know if I can do it." "Yes, you can." "Ethan, come home. We'll talk about it." Home. He'd said home. Claire got in her car and drove back to the estate, her mind spinning. The board wanted her to practice again. Dr. Warner thought she should. Sophie thought she should. Even Ethan thought she should. But what did she think? She pulled up to the estate to find Sophie waiting on the front steps, practically vibrating with excitement. "Mrs. Chen told me where you went. What did they say?" "They want me to get my license back." Sophie threw her arms around Claire in a fierce hug. "That's amazing. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do it." "Why not?" "Because I'm scared. Because what if I make another mistake? What if someone else dies because I missed something?" Sophie pulled back, looking at her seriously. "Then you'll deal with it, like every other doctor deals with it. You'll do your best, and sometimes your best won't be enough, and you'll have to live with that. But at least you'll be helping people." At least you'll be doing something instead of hiding. Ethan appeared in the doorway. Sophie's right. You can't let fear make your decisions. Says the billionaire who controls everything, Claire shot back, then immediately regretted it. But Ethan just smiled sadly. I tried to control everything, tried to manage every variable. And my daughter almost died anyway because I was too focused on control to see what was happening right in front of me. He came down the steps. Sometimes you have to let go, trust yourself, take the risk. Claire looked between them, this father and daughter who'd somehow become her family over the past month, who believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. I'll think about it, she said. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She wandered downstairs to the library and found herself looking at her old medical journals, the ones she'd asked Mrs. Chen to retrieve from storage. She opened one at random, an article about trauma protocols, her handwriting in the margins, notes from when she'd been learning, before the mistakes, before the fear. She'd loved this once, the challenge, the puzzle, the satisfaction of helping people. Maybe she could love it again. Claire was still staring at her old medical journals when she heard the scream. She was moving before she fully processed it, running toward the sound, her heart already racing. The scream had come from upstairs, from Sophie's wing. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her bare feet silent on the carpet. Sophie's door was open, light spilling into the hallway. Claire burst through to find the girl sitting up in bed, her face sheet white, staring at something on her nightstand. Sophie, what? Then Claire saw it. A small glass vial filled with amber liquid, and beside it a note in elegant handwriting. You should have taken the deal. This didn't have to get ugly. Claire's blood went cold. She grabbed the vial carefully, not touching it directly. Don't touch anything. Where did this come from? It was just there when I woke up. I heard something, like a door closing, and then I saw it. Sophie's voice shook. That's Vanessa's handwriting. Ethan appeared in his doorway, his hair disheveled, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. What's going on? Claire held up the vial. Someone left this, with a threat. Ethan's expression went from confused to furious in seconds. How the hell did someone get in here? We have security. Clearly not good enough, Claire said, already moving toward the window. It was closed, locked from the inside. She checked the adjoining bathroom, the closet, everywhere someone could have entered. Nothing. I'm calling the police, Ethan said, pulling out his phone. Sophie grabbed Claire's hand. What if it's poisoned? What if just having it near me? It's in a sealed vial. You're safe. Claire sat beside her on the bed. But we need to get this analyzed. The police arrived 20 minutes later, Detective Morrison and a younger officer who immediately began dusting for fingerprints. Morrison took statements from all of them, his expression grim. Vanessa's still in custody, he said. Has been since arraignment. She couldn't have done this personally. She has money, Ethan said. Money buys people. We'll investigate. In the meantime, I'm recommending you upgrade your security. Cameras in all common areas, better locks, maybe a panic room. A panic room, Ethan repeated flatly. In my own house. Someone got past your security and left a threat next to your daughter while she slept. A panic room doesn't seem excessive. After the police left with the vial and note as evidence, Claire sat with Sophie while Ethan made calls to security companies. The girl was trying to be brave, but Claire could see her hands shaking. I thought it was over, Sophie said quietly. I thought once they arrested her, we'd be safe. We will be. Your dad's going to make sure of it. But what if she tries again? What if next time it's not just a threat? Claire didn't have an answer for that. Because Sophie was right to be scared. Vanessa had already proven she was willing to kill, and now she was desperate. Dawn was breaking when Ethan finally came back upstairs. He looked exhausted, his eyes red from lack of sleep. I've got a security team coming this afternoon. They're going to install cameras, upgrade all the locks, set up a monitoring system. And I'm hiring a private security detail. Someone will be watching the house 24/7. Good, Claire said. I should have done this weeks ago, after Vanessa was arrested. I just thought... He shook his head. I thought we were safe. We couldn't have known she'd do this. I should have known. I should always assume the worst when it comes to protecting Sophie. Sophie spoke up from the bed. Dad, it's not your fault. Yes, it is. All of this is my fault. I brought Vanessa into our lives. I trusted her. I let her get close to you. You didn't know what she was. I should have. Caroline always said I was a terrible judge of character, said I saw people the way I wanted them to be, not the way they actually were. His voice cracked. She was right. Claire stood, putting a hand on his arm. Vanessa fooled everyone. Reed, the staff, Sophie. This isn't about your judgment. It's about her being a skilled manipulator. But she could see the guilt eating at him, the same guilt she'd carried for 3 years. The crushing weight of feeling responsible for someone else's suffering. The security team arrived that afternoon as promised. 6 people who moved through the estate with military precision, assessing vulnerabilities, installing equipment. Claire watched them work while Sophie tried to nap, and Ethan fielded angry calls from his lawyers about the breach. By evening, the house looked like a fortress. Cameras in every hallway, motion sensors on all the windows, reinforced locks on every door, and 2 security guards stationed at the gate, another 2 patrolling the grounds. This is insane, Sophie said, looking at the camera feed displayed on a monitor in Ethan's office. We're prisoners in our own home. We're safe in our own home, Ethan corrected. There's a difference. Doesn't feel different. Claire understood. The estate had always felt too big, too isolated. Now it felt like a cage. That night, Claire lay in bed listening to the house settle around her. Every creak made her tense. Every shadow seemed threatening. She'd checked her own door 3 times, tested the window locks twice. She was being paranoid. The security was solid. They were safe. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, Claire woke to find Sophie already up and dressed, sitting at the kitchen table with Mrs. Chen. You're up early, Claire said. Couldn't sleep. Kept hearing things. Sophie pushed her breakfast around her plate. Is it always going to be like this? Looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows? For a while, maybe, but it gets easier. How do you know? Claire poured herself coffee. Because I've been doing it for 3 years, looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows. Eventually, you learn to live with it. That sounds terrible. It is, but you survive. Sophie studied her for a moment. Is that what you've been doing? Just surviving? The question hit harder than it should have. Because yes, that's exactly what Claire had been doing. Surviving. Getting through each day. Never actually living. Before she could answer, Ethan appeared, already on his phone, his expression dark. The vial tested positive for the same foxglove extract Vanessa was using before. High concentration. If Sophie had ingested even a small amount, he stopped, his jaw tight. The police are questioning Vanessa, but she's not talking. Her lawyer's claiming she has no idea how the vial got there. Of course she is, Claire said. Diana wants to use this as additional evidence. Attempted witness tampering. It could add years to Vanessa's sentence. Good. Ethan set down his phone. There's something else. The security team found evidence of a breach 3 days ago. Someone disabled the alarm system for 47 minutes. We don't know who or how, but it means this was planned. Whoever did it had access to our security codes. Claire felt ice in her stomach. Who has those codes? Me, Mrs. Chen, the security company, and... He stopped. Reed. I gave them to Reed months ago in case of medical emergency. The pieces clicked into place. Reed, who'd been defensive when Claire questioned his treatment. Reed, who'd left in anger when Ethan sided with her. Reed, who had everything to lose if Vanessa was convicted and started talking about how he'd unknowingly helped poison Sophie. We need to tell the police, Claire said. Already did. They're bringing him in for questioning. But something still felt off to Claire. Reed was angry, yes, defensive and proud. But would he really risk everything to help Vanessa? Would he commit a crime to protect someone who'd manipulated him? Unless he wasn't protecting Vanessa. Unless he was protecting himself. What if Reed wasn't fooled? Claire said slowly. What if he knew what Vanessa was doing? Ethan stared at her. That's impossible. He was treating Sophie. Why would he... Money. Vanessa could have paid him. Or promised him something. Access to your wealth once she married you. A position at some prestigious hospital. Claire's mind raced. Think about it. He was prescribing all those medications that weren't helping. He was defensive when I questioned him. He never once considered alternative diagnoses. You think he was deliberately making her sicker? I think he was creating the perfect cover. All those medications, all those symptoms, they made it impossible to see what Vanessa was really doing. The poisoning looked like just another complication of Sophie's mysterious illness. Sophie had gone pale. Dr. Reed tried to kill me too? I don't know. But we need to find out. Ethan was already on the phone with Detective Morrison, relaying Claire's theory. Morrison promised to dig deeper, to look at Reed's finances, his communications with Vanessa. But that took time. And Claire had a bad feeling they didn't have much time. The answer came 2 days later, and it came from an unexpected source. Claire was in the library reviewing the continuing education materials the medical board had sent when Mrs. Chen found her. Ms. Bennett, there's someone at the gate asking for you. Says it's urgent. Claire frowned. Who? He says his name is Dr. Marcus Reed. Every alarm in Claire's body went off. Tell the security guards not to let him in, and call Ethan. He says he has information about Vanessa. Says he'll only talk to you. Claire's mind raced. This could be a trap. Reed could be trying to get inside to finish what Vanessa started, or he could actually have information they needed. Is Ethan home? He's in a video conference. Should I interrupt? Yes. Tell him Reed is here and I'm going to talk to him at the gate. But I'm not letting him inside. Mrs. Chen hurried off. Claire grabbed her phone and walked to the front entrance where she could see Reed on the security monitor. He looked terrible, unshaven, disheveled, like he hadn't slept in days. She spoke through the intercom. What do you want, Reed? His voice crackled through the speaker. I need to talk to you. It's about Vanessa and what she's planning. Talk from there. I'm listening. Not over the intercom. This needs to be private. Then you're out of luck. I'm not letting you in. Claire, please. I know I don't deserve your trust. But Sophie's in danger, real danger. And if you don't listen to me, she's going to die. Claire's hand tightened on the intercom button. You have 2 minutes. Start talking. Reed looked around nervously, like he was afraid of being watched. Vanessa has someone inside your house. Someone who's been feeding her information, helping her plan. That's how she knew about the security codes. How she knew which night to send someone with the vial. Who? I don't know. She wouldn't tell me. But she's planning something bigger. Something that's going to happen during the trial. She said once Sophie testifies, it won't matter anymore because Sophie won't make it out of the courthouse. Claire felt her blood run cold. You're saying she's planning to kill Sophie during the trial? I'm saying she's planning something. I don't know what. But I know it's going to be public, and it's going to look like an accident. Reed pressed closer to the camera. I didn't know about the poisoning, I swear. I thought I was treating a sick girl. But when Vanessa was arrested, she reached out to me, said if I didn't help her, she'd tell everyone I was complicit, that I'd lose my license, my practice, everything. So you helped her threaten a teenage girl? I gave her the security codes, that's all. I didn't know what she was planning to do with them. His voice broke. I've spent 40 years building my reputation. I couldn't let her destroy it. So you were willing to let her destroy Sophie instead? Reed looked down. I know what I did. And I'll have to live with that. But I'm trying to make it right now. I'm telling you everything I know. Ethan appeared beside Claire, having apparently run from his office. What the hell is he doing here? Confessing, Claire said. Then to Reed, tell us everything. Every conversation you had with Vanessa. Every detail she gave you. Reed talked for 20 minutes while Claire and Ethan listened, and a security guard recorded everything on his phone. He described how Vanessa had contacted him through an encrypted messaging app, how she'd threatened to frame him as an accomplice if he didn't help her, how she'd told him there was someone inside the estate feeding her information, but refused to say who. She said this person was loyal to her, Reed said. Said they'd do anything she asked because they owed her, that's all I know. When is this attack supposed to happen? Ethan demanded. The day Sophie testifies. Vanessa said it would be clean, professional, that nobody would ever know it wasn't an accident. After Reed left, escorted by police who'd arrived to take his statement, Claire and Ethan stood in the foyer trying to process what they'd just heard. Someone in this house is working for Vanessa, Ethan said. Someone we trust. We need to figure out who, before the trial. The trial is in 5 days. Claire pulled out her phone. Then we have 5 days to find them. They started with the staff. Mrs. Chen had been with the family for 20 years. The groundskeeper was semi-retired, only came twice a week. The chef was new, hired after Vanessa's arrest. The cleaning crew was contracted through a service. It could be anyone, Ethan said, frustrated. The service rotates staff. We don't have consistent people. Then we start eliminating possibilities. Who has regular access to the house? Who would Vanessa have had time to recruit? They made a list, cross-referenced schedules, looked at who was working when the security breach happened. But nothing clicked. Claire was missing something, some connection she couldn't see. That afternoon, Sophie came to find her in the library. Dad told me about Reed, about someone working for Vanessa. Sophie's voice was carefully controlled, but Claire could hear the fear underneath. He wants me to stop testifying, says it's too dangerous. What do you want? I want her to pay for what she did, but I'm scared. Sophie sat down hard in a chair. What if she really does have someone inside? What if they hurt me before I can even get to court? We're going to find them. We have 5 days. And if you don't? Claire didn't have an answer for that. The next 2 days were a blur of paranoia and investigation. They reviewed security footage, interviewed staff, checked backgrounds. But everyone came up clean. Nobody had obvious connections to Vanessa. Nobody had unexplained income or suspicious behavior. Whoever the mole was, they were good at hiding. On the third day, Claire was going through Sophie's medical records again, looking for any pattern she'd missed, when something caught her eye. A prescription notation from 6 months ago, when Sophie's symptoms had first started. The prescription was for Vitaplex 7, the supplement Reed had claimed was harmless. But the handwriting wasn't Reed's. Claire grabbed her phone and called Detective Morrison. I need you to check something. The Vitaplex 7 that was prescribed to Sophie. Who actually wrote that prescription? Morrison put her on hold. Claire waited, her heart pounding. When he came back, his voice was grim. According to the pharmacy records, it wasn't prescribed by Reed. It was ordered by someone named Angela Chen. Claire's stomach dropped. Mrs. Chen? Is that the housekeeper? Claire was already moving, running toward Ethan's office. She found him at his desk, going through more security footage. It's Mrs. Chen, she said. She's the one working for Vanessa. Ethan looked up, his face going pale. That's impossible. She's been with us for 20 years. Check the Vitaplex prescription, the one that was poisoning Sophie. Mrs. Chen ordered it. She manages all of Sophie's medications. She probably just filled whatever Reed prescribed. Reed didn't prescribe it. Someone forged his signature. And that someone had access to prescription pads, to pharmacy accounts, to everything Reed used. Claire's mind raced. Who manages the household medical supplies? Mrs. Chen, Ethan said slowly. But she wouldn't. Caroline trusted her completely. Maybe that's why Vanessa targeted her. What does Mrs. Chen owe Vanessa? What hold does she have? Ethan's face changed. Her son, Mrs. Chen's son, was arrested for embezzlement 2 years ago. Vanessa told me she'd helped with his legal defense, said it was the charitable thing to do. She didn't help, she bought loyalty. Claire pulled out her phone. We need to find Mrs. Chen, now. But Mrs. Chen was nowhere to be found. Her room was empty. Her car was gone. And when they checked the security footage, they saw her leaving through the service entrance an hour ago, carrying a small suitcase. She ran, Ethan said. Or she's getting into position. Reed said the attack would happen at the courthouse. What if Mrs. Chen is already there setting it up? They called Morrison, who sent officers to Mrs. Chen's apartment. But she wasn't there either. She'd vanished. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. Tomorrow was the trial. Tomorrow, Sophie would testify. And somewhere out there, Mrs. Chen was planning something that would make it look like an accident. She got up, pacing her room, trying to think. What kind of accident would work in a courthouse? What could Mrs. Chen do that wouldn't be obviously murder? Her phone rang. Morrison. We found Mrs. Chen's computer. She'd been researching allergies, specifically anaphylactic reactions. Claire's blood went cold. Sophie doesn't have any allergies. That you know of, but an allergic reaction could be induced if someone knew what they were doing and had the right medications. EpiPens. If Mrs. Chen has access to EpiPens, she could tamper with them, replace the epinephrine with something else, something that would cause anaphylaxis instead of treating it. We're checking with the courthouse medical staff. But Claire, if she's already planted something, we might not find it in time. Claire hung up and ran to Sophie's room. The girl was awake, staring at her phone. You can't testify tomorrow, Claire said. What? No, I have to. It's too dangerous. Mrs. Chen is planning something. We don't know what, but, Then we'll be careful. We'll check everything, but I'm not backing down. Sophie's voice was firm. Vanessa doesn't get to win because I'm scared. Sophie, no. You told me silence protects the wrong people. You told me the things worth doing are hard. This is hard, but it's worth doing. Sophie stood, squaring her shoulders. I'm testifying, and you're going to make sure I survive it. Claire wanted to argue, wanted to lock Sophie in her room and refused to let her leave. But she understood that look in the girl's eyes, the determination, the courage. She'd seen it in the mirror 3 years ago, before everything fell apart. Okay, Claire said quietly, but we do this my way. We check everything. We don't trust anyone. And at the first sign of trouble, we get you out of there. Deal. The next morning, they arrived at the courthouse with a security detail that would have impressed a foreign dignitary. 4 private guards, 2 police escorts, and Claire, who'd appointed herself Sophie's personal shadow. They'd brought their own water, their own food. They'd checked the courtroom for any planted medications. They'd confirmed with the courthouse medical staff that all EpiPens were accounted for and sealed. But Claire still couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. The courtroom was packed. Vanessa sat at the defense table, looking elegant and composed, like this was a social event instead of a trial for attempted murder. Her eyes found Sophie, and she smiled. A cold, calculated smile that made Claire's skin crawl. Diana Reeves, the prosecutor, approached them during a recess. We're ready when you are. I'll keep it straightforward. Just have Sophie describe her symptoms, her interactions with Vanessa, what she remembers about the tea. Sophie nodded, her face pale but determined. They called her to the stand. Claire watched from the gallery, her every muscle tense, scanning the room for threats. Mrs. Chen wasn't there, at least not that Claire could see, but that didn't mean she wasn't planning something. Sophie's testimony was powerful. She described months of illness, the constant weakness, the fear. She described how Vanessa had been so kind, so caring, bringing her tea and honey and sitting with her when she felt sick. I trusted her, Sophie said, her voice breaking. She was going to be my stepmother. I thought she loved me. Vanessa's lawyer stood for cross-examination, a sharp-eyed woman in an expensive suit. Miss Calloway, isn't it true you've had emotional problems since your mother's death? I've been in therapy. Yes. And isn't it true you've been prescribed multiple psychiatric medications? Because I was being poisoned, not because I was mentally ill. But how can we know that? How can we know your symptoms weren't psychosomatic? Diana objected. The judge sustained, but the damage was done. The lawyer had planted doubt. Claire watched Sophie hold her ground, answering questions with quiet strength. Watched Vanessa's smile falter when her lies were exposed. Watched the jury lean forward, engaged, believing. They were going to win. Vanessa was going to prison. And that's when Claire saw it. Mrs. Chen, dressed in a courthouse uniform, approaching the water cooler near the witness stand with a small vial in her hand. Claire was moving before she could think. She vaulted over the gallery railing, running toward the witness stand. Sophie, don't drink anything. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Bailiffs rushed toward Claire. Mrs. Chen dropped the vial and ran for the exit. Sophie froze, her hand halfway to the water cup. Claire reached her, knocking the cup from her hand. It shattered on the floor, water spreading across the tiles. Security tackled Mrs. Chen before she reached the door. Police swarmed the spilled vial, carefully bagging it as evidence. And Claire stood in the middle of the chaos, breathing hard, Sophie's hand gripped tight in hers. I've got you, she said. You're safe. I've got you. The trial recessed while police secured the scene. Testing confirmed the vial contained a concentrated allergen mix that would have triggered severe anaphylaxis. If Sophie had drunk the water, she would have died within minutes. Mrs. Chen confessed everything. How Vanessa had threatened to expose her son's crimes if she didn't help. How she'd been feeding Vanessa information for months. How she'd planned to make Sophie's death look like a tragic allergic reaction that nobody could have prevented. Vanessa's lawyer immediately started negotiating a plea deal. But it didn't matter. The jury had seen enough. They'd seen the poison. They'd seen the conspiracy. They'd seen a woman willing to kill a child to get what she wanted. The verdict came back 3 hours later. Guilty on all counts. Claire was in the hallway when they announced it, sitting beside Sophie while Ethan spoke to Diana and the detectives. She felt numb, relieved, exhausted. Sophie leaned her head on Claire's shoulder. It's really over. Yeah, it's really over. I almost died again. That's 3 times you've saved me now. Let's not go for 4. Sophie laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. Deal. Ethan emerged from the conference room, his face drawn but relieved. 30 years minimum. She'll be eligible for parole when she's in her 60s. Good, Claire said. Diana wants to talk to you about what you did, running into the courtroom like that. Claire's stomach sank. I'm in trouble. Apparently you're a hero. Courthouse security wants to give you some kind of commendation. He shook his head. You really can't stop saving people, can you? Apparently not. They left the courthouse together, stepping out into late afternoon sunlight. Claire blinked against the brightness, feeling like she'd been underground for weeks. Sophie took a deep breath. What now? Now, Ethan said, we go home, and we figure out what normal looks like. But as they drove back to the estate, Claire couldn't help wondering if normal was even possible anymore. She'd saved Sophie 3 times now, had stopped a killer, had helped put a monster in prison. But she still wasn't sure she'd saved herself. That night, Claire couldn't stay in the house. She told Ethan she needed air, needed space, needed to clear her head after the chaos of the trial. What she really needed was distance from the weight of everything that had happened, distance from Sophie's grateful eyes and Ethan's unspoken expectations, and the feeling that she was drowning in a life that wasn't hers. She drove to the waterfront and walked until her feet hurt, watching boats bob in the harbor, breathing in salt air and trying to remember who she'd been before all of this started, before the diner, before Sophie collapsed, before she became someone who ran into courtrooms and knocked poison from dying girls' hands. Her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but it was Dr. Warner. Claire, I heard what happened at the courthouse. Are you all right? I'm fine. You don't sound fine. Claire laughed, the sound brittle. I just watched someone try to kill a 16-year-old girl for the 3rd time in 2 months. Fine might be asking too much. Fair point. Warner was quiet for a moment. I also heard you're being credited with saving her life. Again. I just saw something and reacted. That's what good physicians do. They see what others miss and they act. He paused. Have you thought about what I said? About reinstatement? Claire stared out at the water. I don't know if I can do it. Can't or won't? Does it matter? Yes. Can't means you lack ability. Won't means you lack courage. You've proven you have the ability. So the question is whether you're brave enough to use it again. After he hung up, Claire sat on a bench and watched the sun set over the Sound. She thought about Daniel Carver, the boy who'd died on her operating table. She thought about Sophie, who'd almost died 3 times but didn't. She thought about the difference between those outcomes and whether any of it was really her fault or her credit. Medicine was chaos dressed up as science. You did your best, and sometimes people died anyway. Sometimes they lived despite everything going wrong. The trick was learning to live with the randomness without letting it destroy you. She'd never learned that trick. She'd let one death define her entire existence, had given Daniel Carver's memory more power than all the lives she'd saved combined. Maybe it was time to stop. When she got back to the estate, it was after midnight. She expected everyone to be asleep, but lights were on in the kitchen. She found Sophie sitting at the counter, eating ice cream straight from the container. Couldn't sleep either? Claire asked. Sophie shook her head. Every time I close my eyes, I see Mrs. Chen with that vial. I keep thinking about how I trusted her, how she took care of me when Mom was dying, how she'd make me soup when I was sick and help me with my homework, and her voice broke. How could she do that? How could she take care of me and then try to kill me? Claire sat beside her, taking the ice cream and helping herself to a spoonful. Because people are complicated. They're not just good or just bad. They're both at the same time, and sometimes circumstances push them toward one side more than the other. That's not an excuse. No, it's not. What she did was unforgivable. But understanding why people do terrible things doesn't mean excusing them. It just means accepting that humans are messy and broken and capable of things that don't make sense. Sophie considered this. Do you think she regrets it? Probably. But regret doesn't undo the harm. Is that how you feel? About the patient you lost? Claire set down the spoon. Yes. I regret every decision I made that day, every choice that led to that outcome. But regret doesn't bring him back. It just sits there, taking up space, making it hard to breathe. So what do you do with it? I don't know. I've been trying to figure that out for 3 years. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know what helped me after Mom died? Someone told me that grief isn't something you get over. It's something you learn to carry, like a backpack full of rocks. At first it's so heavy you can barely move, but eventually you get stronger. The backpack doesn't get lighter, but you get better at carrying it." Claire felt tears prickling at her eyes. That's wise. I read it on a grief counseling website, but it's true. I still miss my mom every day, but it doesn't crush me anymore. I can carry it and still live my life. She looked at Claire. Maybe your guilt is the same. Maybe you don't have to get rid of it. Maybe you just have to get strong enough to carry it while you do other things. Claire pulled Sophie into a hug, this impossibly wise girl who'd survived more than anyone should have to survive. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. Everyone was just too busy looking at my symptoms to notice. They sat together in the kitchen, eating ice cream and talking about nothing important until the sky started to lighten. And for the first time in 3 years, Claire felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. The next morning, Ethan found Claire in the library, surrounded by the continuing education materials from the medical board. "You're really doing it," he said. "Getting your license back." "I'm thinking about it." "That's progress." He sat across from her, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him since the trial. "I wanted to talk to you about something." Claire braced herself. This was it. The conversation where he thanked her for everything and told her it was time to move on. That Sophie was safe now and they didn't need a former surgeon playing doctor anymore. "I know I hired you as a consultant," Ethan said. "Temporary. Just until we figured out what was wrong with Sophie." "Right. But I'd like you to stay. Permanently." Claire blinked. "What?" "Not as a consultant. As, I don't know what to call it, Sophie's physician once you get your license. A member of the household. Family." He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "I'm not good at this. Caroline always said I turned everything into a business transaction. But this isn't that. This is me asking you to stay because we need you, because Sophie needs you, because I—" He stopped, seemed to recalibrate. "Because this house has been full of people for years, but it's never felt like a home until you were here." Claire's throat tightened. "Ethan, I know it's a lot, and I know you probably want to get back to your own life, but I'm asking anyway. Stay. Help Sophie finish growing up. Help me figure out how to be a better father. Help us be a family again." "I don't know if I can be what you need. You already are. You've been showing up for Sophie since the moment you met her. That's all I'm asking. Keep showing up." Claire looked at this man who'd started as an arrogant billionaire barking orders at his daughter and had slowly become someone real, someone broken and trying, someone who reminded her that people could change if they were willing to do the work. "What about when I screw up?" she asked. "What about when I make another mistake?" "Then you'll deal with it, and we'll help you. That's what families do. They screw up and forgive each other and keep going." "I've never been good at family." "Neither have I. We can learn together." Before Claire could respond, Sophie appeared in the doorway. "Are you asking her to stay?" "Because I already told you she's staying. I'm not letting her leave." Ethan laughed. "I'm trying to give her a choice, Sophie." "Well, she's choosing to stay. Right, Claire?" Claire looked between them, this father and daughter who'd somehow become her people, who'd seen her at her worst and her best and decided she was worth keeping anyway. "I need to finish the continuing education requirements first, and the supervised practice period. That's 6 months minimum." "So that's a yes?" Sophie asked hopefully. "That's a maybe working toward a yes." Sophie threw her arms around Claire. "I'll take it." The next 6 months were harder than Claire expected. The continuing education was straightforward. Online courses, seminars, refresher training. But the supervised practice was humbling. She worked at a community clinic under Dr. Warner's supervision, seeing patients and second-guessing every decision, terrified of making another fatal mistake. Warner was patient but firm. When she hesitated too long over a diagnosis, he'd push her. When she was too cautious with a treatment plan, he'd remind her that overcaution could be as dangerous as recklessness. When she spiraled into anxiety over a patient who reminded her of Daniel Carver, he'd sit with her until she could breathe again. "You're a good doctor," he told her after a particularly difficult case. But you're so afraid of being wrong that you're not letting yourself be right. What if I kill someone? What if you save them? What if your fear of failure means you don't try, and someone dies because of your inaction instead of your action? It was the same argument Sophie had made, the same logic that had driven Claire to grab that steak knife in the diner. But applying it to everyday medicine instead of emergencies was different. It required trusting herself consistently, not just in moments of crisis. She worked on it. Some days were better than others. At home, because the estate had become home, even though Claire still felt like an imposter sometimes, Sophie was thriving. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost. Her color was good. Her energy was normal for a teenager, which meant she slept until noon on weekends and complained about homework and spent hours on the phone with friends. She'd started talking about college, about majors and campuses and what she wanted to do with her life. The future that had seemed impossible 6 months ago was suddenly real and approaching fast. "I'm thinking pre-med," Sophie announced one evening at dinner. Ethan nearly choked on his wine. "Pre-med? Since when?" "Since I spent months watching doctors fail to diagnose me and then watched Claire figure it out in 30 seconds. I want to be the person who sees what everyone else misses." "Medicine is hard," Claire said carefully, "and sometimes you do everything right and people die anyway." "I know, you've told me," Sophie smiled. "But sometimes you do everything right and people live, and that's worth the risk." Claire saw herself in that smile, the version of herself from before Daniel Carver, the one who'd believed medicine was about saving lives instead of counting failures. Maybe she could be that person again. 3 months into her supervised practice, Claire got a call from Lawrence Mitchum at the medical board. "Dr. Bennett, I wanted to give you an update on your reinstatement petition." Claire's heart hammered. "Okay. We've reviewed Dr. Warner's evaluations. Your continuing education is complete. Your supervised practice reports are excellent. The board has voted to approve your reinstatement pending one final requirement." "What requirement?" "We need you to submit a written statement about the Daniel Carver case. Not a legal document, just your perspective. What you learned, how you've grown. We want to ensure you've processed the event in a healthy way before we return you to independent practice." Claire stared at her phone. They wanted her to write about Daniel, to examine the worst day of her life and explain what it had taught her. She spent 2 weeks avoiding it, then another week staring at a blank document. Finally, late one night, she started typing. She wrote about the surgery, the decisions she'd made, the microscopic tear she'd missed, the moment she'd realized Daniel wasn't going to make it, the sound of his mother's scream when they told her. She wrote about the guilt, the shame, the certainty that she'd failed at the one thing that mattered most. But then she wrote about Sophie, about seeing a dying girl and choosing to act instead of freezing, about trusting her instincts even when they terrified her, about learning that mistakes were inevitable but giving up was a choice. She wrote about how carrying Daniel's death had made her a more careful physician but also a more fearful one, how she'd let one tragedy erase years of success, how she was learning to hold both truths at once, that she'd made a mistake and that she was still worthy of practicing medicine. She wrote until she was crying too hard to see the keyboard. Then she saved the document, attached it to an email, and sent it to Mitchum before she could second-guess herself. His response came the next day. "Thank you for your honesty. The board has approved your reinstatement." "Welcome back to medicine, Dr. Bennett." Claire read the email 3 times before she believed it. She was a doctor again. She told Sophie first. The girl screamed and hugged her and immediately started planning a celebration. Then she told Ethan, who smiled in a way that made her chest feel tight. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I haven't done anything yet. You did the hardest thing. You forgave yourself enough to try again." That night, they had dinner together, Claire, Ethan, Sophie, and Dr. Warner, who'd driven out to celebrate. Sophie made a toast that was equal parts touching and embarrassing. Warner told stories about Claire's training that made her want to hide under the table. Ethan watched it all with an expression Claire couldn't quite read. After Warner left and Sophie went to bed, Claire found Ethan on the terrace overlooking the Sound. "Big day," he said. "Yeah." "How does it feel?" Claire considered the question. "Terrifying. Like I'm about to step off a cliff and I don't know if there's ground underneath." "But you're stepping anyway." "Apparently I'm getting better at doing terrifying things." Ethan turned to look at her, backlit by the house lights. And Claire was struck by how different he looked from the angry, exhausted man who'd stormed into the diner months ago. The hard edges had softened. The perpetual tension in his shoulders had eased. He looked like someone who'd learned to breathe again. "I need to tell you something," he said. "And I need you to just listen until I'm done, because if you interrupt, I'll lose my nerve." Claire's stomach flipped. "Okay." When Caroline died, I thought that was it for me. I thought I'd used up my one chance at happiness, and everything after would just be going through the motions, raising Sophie, running the company, existing. He paused. I was so lonely, I let Vanessa in. I ignored every warning sign because I couldn't stand the silence anymore, and I almost lost Sophie because of it. "Ethan, let me finish." He stepped closer. "You showed up in my life at the worst possible moment, when everything was falling apart. And you didn't try to fix me or save me or make promises about the future. You just saw what needed to be done and you did it. You saved my daughter. You called me out when I was being an idiot. You made us feel like a family again." Claire's heart was racing now. "I'm not good at this," Ethan continued, "at feelings and vulnerability and all the things Caroline was so much better at. But I need you to know that somewhere between the diner and the courthouse and all the chaos in between, I fell in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and true. "You don't have to say anything," Ethan added quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know you're just getting your life back together. I just needed you to know, because hiding it was starting to hurt more than risking rejection." Claire opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I'm a mess," she finally said. "I have panic attacks about patients I haven't even treated yet. I wake up at 3 in the morning convinced I've missed something catastrophic. I can barely take care of myself, let alone, I'm not asking you to take care of me. I'm asking if you feel anything close to what I feel. Because if you do, we can figure out the rest together. And if you don't, we can pretend this conversation never happened and go back to being friends who happen to live in the same house." Claire looked at him, really looked, at the vulnerability in his eyes, the hope and fear mixed together, the courage it took to say these things out loud. She thought about the past 6 months, about dinners around the kitchen table and late-night conversations about nothing important, and the way her chest felt tight whenever he smiled, about how the estate had stopped feeling like a prison and started feeling like home specifically because he was there. "I feel it," she said quietly. "I've been trying not to because it seemed like a terrible idea, but I feel it." Ethan's expression transformed. "Yeah? Yeah, you're arrogant and overprotective and you turn everything into a business transaction, even when you're trying not to. But you're also kind and you're trying so hard to be a good father, and you make me want to be brave." She stepped closer. "So yes, I feel it, and I have no idea what to do about it. We could start with dinner, just the two of us, somewhere that's not this house." "Like a date?" "Exactly like a date." Claire smiled despite herself. "That seems almost normal. We could use some normal." "What about Sophie?" "Sophie's been asking when I was going to stop being an idiot and tell you how I feel. She'll be thrilled." They stood there on the terrace, close enough to touch but not quite touching, while the sound stretched out dark and infinite below them. "This is crazy," Claire said. "Most good things are. What if it doesn't work?" "What if it does?" Claire laughed, the sound lighter than she'd felt in years. "When did you become an optimist?" "When you showed me it was possible. When you saved Sophie and stayed and made us believe things could get better." He reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "You gave me my daughter back. Let me try to give you your life back." Claire squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of the moment, the terrifying possibility of happiness, the chance to build something instead of just surviving. "Okay," she said. "Okay, let's try." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. And Claire kissed him back, tasting salt air and possibility, and the strange miracle of second chances. When they finally pulled apart, she was crying. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, concerned. "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." She wiped her eyes. 3 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd destroyed everything that mattered, and there was no coming back from that. And now I'm standing here with you and Sophie's healthy, and I'm a doctor again, and it feels like maybe you deserve good things after all. Yeah, like maybe I do. You do, you always did, you just needed to believe it. They went inside together, hand in hand, and found Sophie sitting on the stairs, grinning like she'd won the lottery. "Finally," she said. "I thought I was going to have to lock you in a room together." "You were listening?" Ethan asked. "Of course I was listening. This is my house, too." She came down the stairs and hugged them both. "So does this mean Claire's staying forever?" "If she wants to," Ethan said. Sophie looked at Claire expectantly. Claire thought about the diner where this had all started, about the moment she'd chosen to act instead of hiding, about every terrifying decision since that had led her here. "Yeah," she said. "I want to." The following weeks blurred together in the best possible way. Claire started working part-time at the community clinic while maintaining her role in Sophie's care. Ethan scaled back his hours at the company, delegating more so he could be present for dinner and family time. Sophie continued healing, her follow-up tests coming back clean, her strength returning. They went on dates, Claire and Ethan, awkward at first, then easier. They argued about movies and discovered they both hated fancy restaurants, and learned to navigate the complicated dance of building a relationship while living in the same house as his teenage daughter. Sophie was thrilled and occasionally embarrassing about it, making pointed comments about how happy they seemed and asking when she could start calling Claire Mom. "Never," Claire said. "You had a mom. I'm not trying to replace her." "I know, but you could be like a bonus mom, a mom-adjacent person. How about we stick with Claire for now?" "Fine. But I'm writing you into my college essays as the woman who saved my life and then became my family. That's way more interesting than my dad's girlfriend. Please don't." "Too late. Already drafted it." 4 months after the trial, Claire got a letter from Daniel Carver's mother. She almost didn't open it, almost threw it away unopened, terrified of what it might say. But Sophie found her staring at it in the library. "What's that?" "A letter from someone I hurt. Someone whose son died because of me." Sophie sat beside her. "Are you going to read it?" "I don't know if I can." "Want me to read it first? I can tell you if it's awful." Claire considered this, then handed over the letter. Sophie opened it carefully, her eyes scanning the page. Her expression shifted, surprise, then something softer. "It's not what you think," she said quietly. "What does it say?" Sophie handed it back. "You should read it yourself." With shaking hands, Claire read. "Dr. Bennett, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know what happened with Daniel still haunts you. Your colleagues have told me as much. But I needed to write this because I've carried something for 3 years that I should have said sooner. I don't blame you for Daniel's death. I did at first. I was angry and grieving, and I needed someone to be responsible. But as time passed and I learned more about what actually happened, I realized something. You didn't kill my son. A freak complication killed my son. You tried to save him. You did everything right, and sometimes that's still not enough. I saw the news about you saving the Calloway girl. I saw that you've been hiding from medicine for 3 years because you blamed yourself for Daniel. And I realized I played a part in that. My anger and my lawsuit and my grief made you think you were a bad doctor when the truth is you were exceptional. Daniel would have died no matter who was operating that day. The autopsy proved it. But because it was you, because you were so skilled and so careful, he had the best possible chance. You gave my son 6 more hours than he would have had otherwise. 6 hours where I got to hold his hand and tell him I loved him and say goodbye. That was a gift, and I never thanked you for it. I don't expect this letter to fix anything. I don't expect you to forgive yourself just because I've forgiven you. But I want you to know that I see you. I see the good you've done and the lives you've saved, and I hope someday you can see it too. Please don't let Daniel's death stop you from saving others. That would be the real tragedy. Sincerely, Margaret Carver. Claire read it twice, tears streaming down her face. Sophie put an arm around her shoulders and just held her while she cried. Not from grief this time, but from release. She'd been carrying Margaret Carver's anger for 3 years, using it as proof that she deserved to suffer. But Margaret had let it go, had seen the truth, had forgiven her. Now the only person who hadn't forgiven Claire was Claire herself. "You okay?" Sophie asked softly. "I think so. I think I might actually be okay." That evening, Claire showed the letter to Ethan. He read it silently, then pulled her into his arms. "She's right, you know, about all of it." I know. I think I've known for a while, but reading it from her, Claire's voice caught. It makes it real. So what now? Now I stop punishing myself for being human. I accept that I did my best, and I try to do better going forward. That sounds healthy. Dr. Warner would be proud. Ethan kissed her forehead. I'm proud. You've come so far from the woman who wouldn't even admit she was a doctor. That woman was scared. And now? Claire thought about it. Now I'm still scared. But I'm not letting fear make my decisions anymore. 6 weeks later, Claire started her first day as an attending physician at Seattle Grace Hospital. The same hospital where she'd trained, where she'd lost Daniel, where she'd walked away 3 years ago certain she'd never return. Dr. Hayes met her in the hallway outside the trauma department, looking older but still fierce. Dr. Bennett, welcome back. Thank you for giving me a chance. I'm not giving you anything. You earned this. Now stop looking terrified and get to work. We've got a multi-vehicle collision coming in, and I need my best trauma surgeon. I'm not... Yes, you are. You always were. Now move. The trauma bay was exactly as Claire remembered. The controlled chaos, the overlapping voices, the smell of antiseptic and blood, the urgency. A young resident looked up as Claire entered. Are you the attending? Yes. Patient's a 23-year-old male, blunt force trauma to the abdomen, possible internal bleeding. Vitals are... Claire was already moving, her training taking over, her hands steady. She worked quickly, efficiently, directing the team, making decisions based on years of experience she'd tried to bury. The surgery took 4 hours. When it was done, the patient was stable and headed for recovery. Claire scrubbed out, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. She'd done it, she'd operated, and nobody had died. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. How was your first day? Terrifying. Amazing. Exhausting. I saved someone. Of course you did. Come home when you're ready. We'll celebrate. Home. The estate. Sophie and Ethan, and the life she'd somehow built from the wreckage of her old one. Claire changed out of her scrubs and drove back, watching the sun set over the Sound. She thought about the shy waitress who'd been hiding in a diner 6 months ago. About the woman who'd been so afraid of making mistakes that she'd stopped trying at all. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who understood that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Someone who'd learned that second chances weren't given, they were taken. When she got home, Sophie was waiting at the door. How was it? Good. Hard, but good. Did you save anyone? Yeah, I did. Sophie hugged her fiercely. I knew you would. You're a hero, Claire. You've always been a hero. I'm really not. Yes, you are. You saved me 3 times. You saved that guy today. You saved yourself when you decided to stop hiding. Sophie pulled back, looking at her seriously. That makes you a hero, even if you don't feel like one. Ethan appeared behind Sophie, smiling. She's right, though I'm biased. You're both ridiculous. Maybe, but you're ridiculous. He kissed her. Dinner's ready. Mrs. Chen's replacement made lasagna. They ate together, the 3 of them, talking about Claire's day and Sophie's college applications and Ethan's meetings. Normal family things, the kind of ordinary, beautiful moments Claire had never thought she'd have again. After dinner, Sophie went upstairs to study, leaving Claire and Ethan alone on the terrace. You did it, Ethan said. You really did it. You came back. I had help. You had courage. That was all you. Claire leaned against him, looking out at the water. You know what's strange? I spent 3 years thinking my life was over, that I destroyed everything that mattered, but I had to lose it all to find this, to find you and Sophie and a version of myself I didn't know existed. Seems like a hard way to get here. Yeah, but maybe that's how it works. Maybe you have to break completely before you can rebuild into something better. Is that what you are now? Something better? Claire considered the question. She thought about the scared woman hiding in a diner, about the moment she'd chosen to grab a steak knife instead of walking away, about every impossible choice since that had led her here. I'm something different, she said finally. Not better or worse, just different. More honest. More willing to fail. More willing to try. I'll take it. They stood there together as stars emerged overhead, and Claire felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of fear or doubt or grief. Those things were still there, probably always would be. But they no longer defined her. They were just part of the complicated, messy, beautiful truth of being human. She'd made mistakes. She'd lost patience. She'd run and hidden and hurt people who loved her. But she'd also saved lives. She'd shown up when it mattered. She'd learned to forgive herself for being imperfect. And that was enough. That was everything. "I love you," she told Ethan, the words coming easier now. "I love you too." He pulled her closer. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up. On Sophie. On yourself. On us." Claire smiled. "Thank you for being stubborn enough to make me try." They went inside together, back to the warmth and light and noise of family. Sophie was laughing at something on her phone. The house smelled like lasagna and coffee. Music was playing from somewhere upstairs. It was ordinary. It was perfect. It was everything Claire had thought she didn't deserve. But she was learning to accept good things, learning to believe she belonged here, learning that redemption wasn't a destination, but a choice you made every day to keep trying despite everything. She'd been the shy waitress nobody noticed, the failed surgeon running from her past, the woman too afraid to hope. Now she was Sophie's protector, Ethan's partner, a physician who'd learned that strength wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up imperfect and trying anyway. She was finally, impossibly, home. And the shy waitress who'd grabbed a steak knife in a rundown diner 6 months ago, she'd saved more than Sophie Calloway's life that morning. She'd saved her own.